Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Explorer. Tonight, we're off to a land where rainforest canopies whisper like bedtime stories, where waves brush the shore like the turning of soft pages, and where music, sweet and steady, flows through every street. This is Brazil, a country vast and vivid, wrapped in jungle green and carnival gold. Whether you're already tucked under the covers, swaying in a sleepy chair, or just trying to let the day melt away, I'm so glad you're here. This channel is all about slowing down, breathing easy, and drifting off to places far and wide, one story at a time. Now, I must confess, I've done my best to make this video just relaxing enough to lull you into a lovely snooze. But there's always a chance it might be too interesting. If you end up staying awake to learn about samba rhythms, Amazonian creatures, or the irresistible smell of pão de queijo, well, I hope you'll forgive me. At least your dreams might be a little more colourful. Before we begin our journey, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments if you'd like to share your little corner of the night. And if this gentle wander through Brazil brings you a little calm, a little curiosity, or maybe a much-needed nap, please consider liking the video or subscribing to the channel. It helps keep these sleepy travels going strong. Alright, breathe in slow, let your eyes grow heavy. Picture the shimmer of stars above the rainforest, the hush of twilight in a quiet favela, the scent of warm coffee drifting through the air. Our story begins now. This video is intended for relaxation and educational entertainment. It is not medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional care. Imagine stepping into a country that feels like an entire continent unto itself. A place where lush jungles stretch endlessly to the north, where rocky mountains rise up in the south, and where the coastline curves for thousands of miles in shimmering waves. Welcome to Brazil, a land that dances between extremes and manages to feel somehow both endless and intimate at the same time. Geographically speaking, Brazil is the largest country in South America and the fifth largest in the world. It sprawls across nearly half of the South American continent, covering more than 3 million square miles. That's about the same size as the continental United States, give or take a few beach towns. It borders every country in South America except for Ecuador and Chile, wrapping around nations like Argentina, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela with a neighbourly sprawl. And yet, for all its massive size, Brazil feels intensely alive and present in every inch. The country is sliced into 5 main regions: the north, northeast, central west, southeast, and south, each with its own landscapes, climates, and cultural rhythms. You could travel for months and still feel like you've only scratched the surface. Let's start with the Amazon, shall we? The northern region of Brazil is home to the Amazon rainforest, the largest tropical rainforest on Earth. This is the green heart of the planet, a tangle of life that breathes out oxygen, hums with biodiversity, and hosts creatures you might think were dreamed up in a fever nap. Pink river dolphins, jaguars, howler monkeys, sloths moving in slow motion. It's not a zoo, it's just Tuesday in the jungle. The Amazon River, which snakes through the region, is so wide in places that you can't see the opposite shore. In fact, during the rainy season, it can swell to over 120 miles across, becoming more like a moving lake than a river. Now drift your eyes east, where the rainforest gives way to coastline, nearly 5,000 miles of it. Brazil's Atlantic shoreline is among the longest in the world, and it's where many first-time visitors fall in love. Think golden sands that seem to stretch into tomorrow, palm trees waving like sleepy dancers, and beach towns that pulse with music long after the sun has set. Cities like Recife, Salvador, and Fortaleza hug this coast with colourful buildings, lively fish markets, and waves crashing in rhythm to the sound of distant drums. Down in the southeast, we find Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, the twin powerhouses of Brazilian culture and commerce. São Paulo is a buzzing, sprawling metropolis. With over 20 million people in the greater metropolitan area, it's one of the largest cities in the world. Skyscrapers stack like dominoes, and traffic winds like a river of red brake lights. It's Brazil's financial centre, where high fashion meets street art, and sushi shops sit beside pastel-coloured bakeries selling pão de queijo. Rio de Janeiro, by contrast, feels like a city built to flirt. Mountains rise dramatically behind it, beaches curve gently in front, and the famous Christ the Redeemer statue spreads its arms high above, watching over the madness below. Rio is carnival energy and coastal charm wrapped into one. It's where samba spills into the streets, and where people sunbathe beside granite peaks. To the south, the climate shifts. Things get cooler and greener. You'll find pine forests and German-inspired villages with half-timbered houses and street signs in both Portuguese and Deutsch. Yes, really. Cities like Curitiba and Blumenau offer a different Brazil entirely. Quieter, more orderly, with beer festivals and a fondness for chocolate. You might think you've wandered into Bavaria if it weren't for the odd toucan flying overhead. Further inland, the Central West region unfolds like a savanna, a flat expanse known as the Cerrado. It's a land of dry grasses, termite mounds, and giant anteaters ambling along dusty roads. This is where you'll find Brasilia, the capital city, designed in the shape of an airplane and built in the 1950s as a modernist dreamscape. Its whitewashed government buildings and sweeping curves are the work of architect Oscar Niemeyer, who seemed to think cities should look like sculptures. It's a fascinating place, planned and polished, floating in the middle of nowhere. And then there's the Pantanal, the world's largest tropical wetland, straddling the Central West. While the Amazon might be more famous, the Pantanal is actually better for spotting wildlife. It's an open, flooded plain where caimans sunbathe like lazy logs, capybaras nibble grass without a care, and hundreds of bird species fill the sky with colour and chatter. But Brazil isn't just geography, it's how all of this feels. Imagine walking out of a quiet forest and into a marketplace, where someone is selling grilled cheese on a stick, while another person plays bossa nova on a guitar. Imagine hearing the splash of a waterfall while kids play football in bare feet nearby. Imagine the way the air changes from thick jungle humidity to crisp mountain breeze as you travel just a few hundred miles. That's Brazil. It's a sensory patchwork, a mosaic of tastes, smells and sounds. The scent of rain on hot earth, the sweetness of ripe mango cut fresh at a roadside stand, the distant rumble of thunder over the highlands, the laughter of friends sharing a hammock, the clink of glasses in a backyard barbecue, the rustle of leaves as a toucan flaps lazily overhead. Even time feels different here. The country officially spans 4 time zones, though most people live in just one. Yet life tends to flow by a slower, more elastic rhythm. Schedules are suggestions. Clocks are less important than conversations. A meeting might start late, but it will probably include coffee, warmth, and maybe a small pastry. Of course, like any place of such scale and diversity, Brazil contains multitudes, urban energy and rural quiet, wealth and poverty, celebration and struggle. It's a land of contradictions, but not in a way that cancels itself out. More like a symphony where dissonant notes somehow make the music richer. You might find yourself in a quiet village where people still ride horses to the market, and then a few days later be stuck in traffic in a megacity with more shopping malls than you can count. You could sip coconut water on a beach with no buildings in sight, or ride a bullet-fast elevator up a luxury high-rise. It's all part of the same rhythm, the same breath, the same giant-hearted land. And the people, warm doesn't quite cover it. There's a national habit of greeting with hugs and cheek kisses, even between near strangers. Family ties run deep. Friends are made over shared meals, games of dominoes, or simply because someone had a guitar and the night felt long. There's a phrase in Portuguese, jeitinho brasileiro, which loosely translates to the Brazilian way. It means flexibility, cleverness, and finding a way through any situation, especially when the rules seem too rigid or the path too narrow. It's both a survival skill and a cultural charm. This adaptability is also why Brazil feels so approachable, even in its vastness. You don't need to understand every word or know the history in detail to feel welcome. A smile, a shared meal, a rhythm you can tap your foot to. These are the things that connect. Even the country's name feels poetic. Brazil comes from pau Brazil, or Brazilwood, a deep red tree once harvested for dye and trade. A colour so vibrant it gave a whole land its name. That's Brazil in a nutshell, or maybe in a coconut. A place so colourful, so rich with life, that even its name comes from something vivid and rare. So, where are you in this moment? Maybe you're floating above a forest in your imagination. Maybe you're picturing sandy beaches with names you can't quite pronounce. Or maybe you're just feeling the warmth of this place slowly settle over you like a blanket. Wherever your mind drifts, know this. Brazil is not just a place on a map. It's a feeling, a pulse, a slow dance between wild nature and human creativity. And tonight, it welcomes you, whether you're wide awake or already halfway to sleep. Time in Brazil doesn't march forward in a straight line. It meanders, sways, loops back, and sometimes dances in circles. To understand the Brazil of today, the colours, the languages, the music, the celebrations, you have to travel not just across its landscapes, but deep into its past. It's a past that spans tens of thousands of years, filled with ancient peoples, mighty empires, colonial ships, gold rushes, resistance, and reinvention. So let's step back, gently, and take a walk through time. Long before Brazil was Brazil, long before it had a name or a border or a flag, this land was home to hundreds of distinct indigenous cultures. Archaeological evidence suggests that human beings have lived in what we now call Brazil for at least 11,000 years. Some researchers believe it could be even longer, perhaps closer to 15,000. These early peoples left behind stone tools, cave paintings, and, more importantly, descendants who still live in the forests, mountains, and rivers of the country today. By the time the first Europeans showed up on the horizon, the land was anything but empty. Estimates vary widely, but there may have been anywhere from 2 to 6 million indigenous people living in the territory divided into hundreds of tribes and nations, each with its own language, customs, and view of the world. Among the largest groups were the Tupi and Guarani, whose names you'll still hear today in languages, city names, and cultural references. These early societies were complex. Some were nomadic, others sedentary. Some lived in communal longhouses, others in smaller family clusters. They fished in rivers, hunted in forests, farmed manioc, and cultivated spiritual traditions deeply tied to the land. Stories were passed down orally, tales of spirits, animals, creation myths, and the interconnectedness of all things. It was a mosaic of human life that stretched from the Atlantic coast deep into the Amazon and beyond. Then, in the year 1500, a Portuguese fleet led by Pedro Álvares Cabral arrived on the shores of what is now the state of Bahia. And just like that, though nothing really happens just like that in history, everything began to change. The Portuguese claimed the land for their crown, and Brazil became a colony. Not through immediate conquest, but through a long, complicated, and often violent process of settlement, trade, conflict, and conversion. At first, the main economic interest was a tree. The pau-Brasil, or Brazil wood, produced a rich red dye that was highly prized in Europe. The dye was extracted from the heartwood, and harvesting it meant cutting the trees down entirely. Forests were cleared, and the dye trade boomed. The name Brazil itself comes from this tree, as if the land were defined not by its people or its mountains, but by the colour it could give to someone else's fabric. In the early days, Portuguese settlers depended heavily on indigenous labour, often coerced or forced through alliances, warfare, and the efforts of Catholic missionaries. Jesuit priests played a significant role in this era, converting and sometimes protecting indigenous communities, though their role is a complex one, part spiritual guidance, part colonial tool. By the mid-16th century, the Portuguese were looking for more profitable ventures. Enter sugar. The northeastern coast of Brazil, especially regions like Pernambuco and Bahia, turned out to be ideal for growing sugarcane. And sugar, at that time, was gold in granular form. Sweet, addictive, and enormously valuable. But sugar plantations were labour-intensive, and the indigenous population, ravaged by European diseases and resistance efforts, was no longer a sustainable source of forced labour, so the Portuguese began importing enslaved Africans. The transatlantic slave trade became the brutal engine of the Brazilian economy for centuries. From the 1500s to the 1800s, Brazil received more enslaved Africans than any other country, estimated at over 4 million people. That is nearly half of all Africans brought to the Americas during the entire transatlantic slave trade. These men, women, and children came from many regions of Africa: Angola, the Congo, West Africa, and they brought with them languages, religions, music, and skills. While they were treated as property and subjected to horrific conditions, they reshaped Brazil in profound ways. African traditions blended with Portuguese and indigenous ones, creating new religions like candomblé and umbanda, new musical rhythms, culinary techniques, dances, and ways of seeing the world. The sugar economy dominated Brazil for centuries, but in the late 1700s and early 1800s, gold was discovered in the state of Minas Gerais, literally general mines. A gold rush swept through the interior. Towns like Ouro Preto sprang up, and with them came ornate Baroque churches, mansions, and an economy fueled by slave labour and the hunger for glittering wealth. This wealth, ironically, never really stayed in Brazil. The Portuguese crown siphoned much of it off to Europe, and Brazil remained a colony in both political and economic terms. But as ideas of independence spread around the world, sparked by the American and French revolutions, those ideas reached Brazil too. And here things took a strange turn. In the early 1800s, Napoleon invaded Portugal, forcing the Portuguese royal family to flee to Brazil. Yes, the entire court packed up and crossed the Atlantic, setting up shop in Rio de Janeiro. Suddenly, Brazil was not a distant colony, but the seat of the empire. The city transformed overnight. Palaces, libraries, opera houses, and for a brief moment, Brazil was at the centre of Portuguese power. When Napoleon was eventually defeated, most of the royal family went back to Europe, but Prince Dom Pedro stayed behind. In 1822, with both popular pressure and a desire to maintain his own power, Dom Pedro declared Brazil independent. No revolution, no guillotine, just a royal shrug and a new crown. He became Emperor Pedro I of Brazil, and the country began its next chapter as a constitutional monarchy. It wasn't always smooth. The monarchy faced regional rebellions, economic struggles, and political infighting. Pedro I abdicated in favour of his young son, Pedro II, who reigned for over half a century. He was a learned man, fluent in multiple languages, fascinated by science and photography, and generally well liked. But his reign was also marked by contradictions. Under his rule, Brazil modernised in some ways, but slavery continued to underpin the economy. It wasn't until 1888, long after many other nations had outlawed slavery, that Brazil finally abolished it. The law was signed by Princess Isabel, Pedro II's daughter, and celebrated with fireworks and music. But freedom, as history so often shows, is not the same as equality. Formerly enslaved people were given no land, no compensation, and few legal protections. Many were left to survive in poverty, their descendants shaping the favelas and labour movements of modern Brazil. Just 1 year after slavery ended, the monarchy was overthrown. In 1889, Brazil became a republic. A flag was hoisted, a constitution written, and the country entered a new phase, one marked by optimism, instability, and a shifting sense of identity. The 20th century brought waves of change. Brazil's cities grew, drawing migrants from the countryside and immigrants from Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Italians, Germans, Japanese. Brazil is home to the largest Japanese population outside of Japan. All brought their languages, food, and traditions into the national melting pot. Politics shifted too. The early republic gave way to military influence, populist leaders, and authoritarian regimes. Getulio Vargas, who ruled for over 15 years in the mid-20th century, styled himself as both father figure and strongman. He modernised infrastructure, introduced labour laws, and expanded education. But he also censored opposition and centralised power. In 1964, a military coup ushered in 2 decades of dictatorship. It was a dark period marked by censorship, repression, and human rights abuses. Yet even then, resistance found its voice in music, literature, art, and whispers. The return to democracy in 1985 was not a sudden revolution, but a careful, negotiated transition. And with it came a renewed focus on civil rights, environmental issues, and cultural pride. Today, Brazil is a democratic federation with 26 states and a federal district. Its political system is complex, sometimes chaotic, and always passionate. Elections are national events. Debates spill onto streets and screens. Democracy here is a living, breathing, sometimes shouting thing. And yet, even amid political storms, Brazil remains a country deeply connected to its history, not in a frozen, nostalgic way, but like a tree rooted in complex soil. The languages spoken today include not just Portuguese, but indigenous tongues, Afro-Brazilian rhythms, Italian dialects, Japanese phrases, and more. The festivals draw on Catholic saints and African spirits. The food tells stories of hunger, migration, and celebration. Walk through a modern Brazilian city, and you might pass colonial churches, Baroque fountains, sleek modernist architecture, and murals painted by indigenous artists, all in the same hour. You might hear a street performer playing a berimbau, a traditional Afro-Brazilian instrument, just steps from a metro station. The past is not hidden. It walks alongside the present, humming softly in the background. Brazil's history is not simple. It is layered and sometimes painful, often beautiful, always rich. It is a story of collision and fusion, of empires and resistance, of voices raised in song and protest alike. And through it all, the land endures, green, vast, and humming with life. The people endure too, resilient, creative, and deeply rooted in stories that stretch far beyond any textbook or timeline. Time in Brazil does not forget. It carries its past like a melody, a little sad, a little sweet, impossible to stop humming. People often try to describe Brazil using numbers. Over 200 million citizens, more than 210 spoken languages, a territory that spans over 3 million square miles. But numbers, while impressive, can't really tell you what it feels like to walk through a neighbourhood in Salvador during sunset, or to share a meal in a São Paulo apartment where 4 generations are gathered around the same table. To understand Brazil, truly, you have to meet its people, or at least feel their heartbeat. Because if Brazil is a land of incredible geography and a tapestry of history, then its people are the threads that hold everything together. Bright, bold, tender, complex threads, woven with joy, resilience, and a strong sense of community. And like everything else in this country, identity here doesn't sit still. It dances. It blends. It evolves. Start with the basics. Brazil is one of the most diverse countries in the world, ethnically, culturally, and linguistically. This diversity is the result of centuries of migration, colonization, forced labour, and cultural exchange. The 3 foundational groups, indigenous peoples, Africans brought through the transatlantic slave trade, and Portuguese colonizers, laid the groundwork for what would become an incredibly rich social fabric. But that's only the beginning. Over time, Brazil welcomed waves of immigrants from Italy, Germany, Spain, Japan, Lebanon, Syria, and more. Some came seeking opportunity, others fleeing conflict or poverty. Each group brought with it traditions, foods, religions, and languages that slowly mingled with what was already here. The result? A nation where you might find a Japanese-Brazilian jazz musician, an Afro-Brazilian priest practicing candomblé, a German-Brazilian baker selling panettone at Christmas, and an indigenous artisan carving ancestral designs into a gourd, all on the same city block. This mingling isn't just surface level, it runs deep into the language, the cuisine, the family structure, the music, the way people interact with one another. Brazilians often refer to their country as a racial and cultural melting pot, a miscigenação, or mix. But it's more like a stew than a smoothie. The ingredients retain their flavour, even as they blend into something greater than the sum of their parts. And while national identity is something most Brazilians share, there's also a deep love for regional roots. Someone from the state of Bahia might identify first as Bahians, with their own accents, food, and traditions. A gaucho from Rio Grande do Sul in the south, where chimarrão is sipped from metal straws and cowboy culture lives on, might feel closer to their regional heritage than anything else. In the northeast, the rhythm of forró music and the scent of carne de sol roasting in clay ovens defines the local flavour of life. In the Amazon, indigenous customs and river life shape daily routines and worldviews. Brazil isn't one Brazil, it's many Brazils. Despite this incredible diversity, or perhaps because of it, there are certain social threads that seem to stitch the country together. One of them is warmth. Not just the tropical kind that comes from the sun, but a human warmth that radiates from smiles, embraces, and shared experiences. In Brazil, personal space is a little more fluid. Hugs and kisses on the cheek are common greetings, even for casual acquaintances. Strangers strike up conversations in elevators, at the beach, or while waiting in line for pão de queijo. There's a casual intimacy to Brazilian social life. People are comfortable with closeness, with talking about feelings, with teasing and laughter and deep emotional expression. It's not unusual to see a grown man cry at a football match, or a grandmother dance with total abandon at a family barbecue. Life is lived out loud, in full colour and full feeling. And at the heart of all this is family. Familia is everything in Brazil. Families tend to be large, extended, and tightly knit. It's common for adult children to live with their parents well into their 30s, not out of economic necessity, but because home is where the love is, and the food, of course. Sundays are often sacred, not necessarily for religious reasons, but for shared meals. These lunches stretch into late afternoons, filled with stories, jokes, and the clatter of cutlery on mismatched plates. Food is a kind of language in Brazil. It's how love is shown, how grief is soothed, how joy is celebrated. A pot of feijoada bubbling on the stove says, "You're home." A slice of bolo de fubá passed around a plastic table says, "We're together." Even a coccinha from a street vendor, eaten with napkins wrapped tight around greasy fingers, carries a kind of comfort that can't be measured in calories. Religion, too, is deeply woven into everyday life, not just in church services or ceremonies, but in subtle rituals, household shrines, and whispered prayers before meals. Brazil is officially a secular country, but about 2/3 of the population identifies as Catholic, a legacy of Portuguese colonisation. That said, religious life in Brazil is anything but uniform. Catholicism here blends with indigenous beliefs and African spiritual practices in ways that create entirely new traditions. Candomblé and Umbanda, for example, are Afro-Brazilian religions that honour deities known as orixás, each linked to natural forces, colours and rhythms. These religions survived centuries of persecution and today are practiced openly in many communities, especially in Bahia. Their ceremonies involve drumming, dance, and spirit possession, not as spectacles, but as sacred acts of connection and healing. It's not uncommon for someone to attend Catholic Mass in the morning and a candomblé gathering in the evening. The lines between faiths are fluid, not fixed. This spiritual openness reflects something broader about Brazilian culture, a comfort with complexity, a willingness to hold contradictions. Brazilians can be simultaneously light-hearted and serious, relaxed and intense, proud and self-deprecating. Humour plays a huge role in daily life, often used as a balm or a mirror. Jokes about politics, bureaucracy, and the state of the roads abound, delivered with a wink and a shrug. Laughter here is survival. But joy in Brazil isn't just a reaction to hardship. It's a cultural cornerstone. Celebrations are big, loud, and heartfelt. Birthdays are marked with entire roasted meats and hours of music. Weddings often stretch into dawn. Even funerals include music and moments of remembrance that blur the line between mourning and celebration. Carnival, of course, is the most famous expression of this joyful spirit. While it's often portrayed as glitter, feathers and parades, and yes, there's plenty of that, it's also a deeply rooted tradition tied to history, community, and creative expression. Samba schools spend months preparing their floats and routines, and the entire neighbourhood joins in. It's not just a party, it's a performance of identity, resilience, and beauty. Community is sacred in Brazil. Neighbourhoods often function like extended families. People know their neighbours, chat with street vendors, look after one another's kids. If your car breaks down, someone will probably stop to help. If you're lost, directions might turn into a guided tour. Even in the largest cities, there's a sense that you're never truly alone. This sense of community extends to the informal economy too. In many parts of Brazil, especially the favelas, people rely on networks of trade, trust, and barter to get by. A neighbour might fix your sink in exchange for a haircut. Someone else might cook meals to sell from their front porch. It's an economy of relationships as much as goods and services, resilient, adaptive, and full of ingenuity. Language also plays a key role in shaping Brazilian identity. Portuguese is the official language, but the way it's spoken here is distinctly Brazilian, melodic, expressive, and full of regional variations. There are phrases and idioms that simply don't translate because they carry cultural meaning woven from laughter, struggle, and intimacy. The Brazilian accent is softer and more nasal than its European cousin, and it shifts subtly from north to south, city to countryside. And within that linguistic landscape, you'll find countless regional dialects, slangs, and indigenous words that are filtered into everyday speech. Even body language is rich. Hand gestures, facial expressions, and tone all play into how meaning is made and shared. Brazilians are masters of non-verbal conversation. A raised eyebrow, a shrug, a click of the tongue can say more than an entire sentence. Despite, or perhaps because of, all this richness, Brazilians are keenly aware of inequality. Social divisions based on race, class, and geography persist. Favelas often sit just blocks away from luxury high-rises. Access to education, healthcare, and opportunity can vary wildly depending on where you're born and the colour of your skin. Yet even in the face of these challenges, the Brazilian spirit endures, often with a smile, a protest song, and a plate of food to share. Resilience here isn't a buzzword, it's built into the culture. You see it in the way people find joy in everyday moments, how they adapt with humour and grace, how they gather together in times of crisis. The word saudade comes to mind. It's a uniquely Portuguese term with no direct English translation. It describes a kind of nostalgic longing, a sweet sorrow for something or someone that's absent. It's a beautiful, aching part of Brazilian identity, present in songs, poetry, and even casual conversations. To live in Brazil, or to truly understand it, is to carry a little saudade in your heart. To know that beauty and pain often dance together, that a single melody can hold both joy and loss, that people, like nations, are complicated, and that's what makes them real. So when you think of Brazil, don't just picture beaches and football fields, though those are wonderful too. Think of the people who laugh with their whole bodies, who kiss you hello even when you've just met, who will argue passionately and then offer you dessert. Think of the little girls learning samba steps from their grandmothers, the uncles manning the grill at Sunday lunch, the teenagers strumming guitars on the stoop. Think of the human heartbeat that echoes through every forest, favela, and festival. Because Brazil's greatest treasure isn't a landmark or a resource. It's the people. Always the people. Spirituality in Brazil is like a river, wide, deep, winding, and often unexpected. It flows around corners, under bridges, and sometimes bubbles up where you least expect it, at a beachside shrine, in a whispered blessing from a grandmother, in a drumbeat rising through the night. It's not just something people do on Sundays or holidays. It's braided into everyday life. In Brazil, the spiritual world is never far from the surface. It hums softly in the background, stitched into music, art, food, and the very rhythm of existence. Let's start with the big picture. Brazil is the largest Catholic country in the world, with more than 100 million people identifying as Catholic. That's more than half the population. But don't let the numbers fool you into thinking that Brazilian Catholicism looks exactly like the version practiced in Rome or Madrid. This is a faith that has danced, sung, and blended its way into something deeply Brazilian, earthy, expressive, and often infused with the scents and sounds of local traditions. In many parts of the country, especially the northeast, Catholicism is vibrant and public. You'll see processions winding through streets with candles flickering like tiny stars, statues of saints draped in flowers, and barefoot pilgrims climbing hills to offer thanks or seek blessings. Religious festivals like the Festa de São João and the Festa do Chirio de Nazaré draw millions of participants, not just out of obligation, but out of joy, devotion, and cultural pride. But alongside this widespread Catholic devotion, you'll also find something uniquely Brazilian, a spiritual landscape that's wildly syncretic. That's a fancy word that simply means blended. In Brazil, it's common for one person to be baptized in a Catholic church, light candles for the Virgin Mary, and also offer fruit to an oryxar in an Afro-Brazilian ceremony. These traditions don't cancel each other out. They coexist, harmonise, and sometimes even share the same altar. Much of this blending comes from Brazil's colonial past. When enslaved Africans were brought to Brazil, they carried with them rich religious traditions, rituals, deities, cosmologies that were deeply connected to nature and ancestry. But under colonial rule, these practices were often banned or hidden. To protect their beliefs, many Africans began to associate their traditional oryxars, powerful spiritual entities, with Catholic saints. For example, Ogun, the oryxar of iron and war, was linked with St. George. Iemanjá, the oryxar of the sea, was paired with Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. This allowed enslaved people to continue practicing their religion under the guise of Catholicism. Over time, these traditions evolved into full-fledged religions of their own, most notably Candomblé and Umbanda. Both are practiced widely in Brazil today, particularly in Bahia, Rio de Janeiro, and São Paulo. While they share some elements, they are distinct systems with their own rituals, beliefs, and histories. Candomblé is rooted in West African spiritual traditions, particularly those of the Yoruba, Fon, and Bantu peoples. It centres around the worship of orixás, each of whom governs different aspects of nature and human life. There's an orixá of thunder and justice, an orixá of rivers and beauty, an orixá of crossroads and transformation. These beings are not distant gods but personal guides, often seen as spiritual parents. Ceremonies in Candomblé involve music, drumming, dancing, and possession. The moment when an orixá enters the body of a devotee, bringing messages, healing, or blessings. Umbanda, on the other hand, is a more recent development. It emerged in the early 20th century and blends elements of African religions, Catholicism, Spiritism, and indigenous beliefs. It's a bit more eclectic and less formalised than Candomblé. In Umbanda, spiritual communication is central. Mediums receive messages from spirits of various kinds, including ancestors, saints, and entities like the caboclos, indigenous spirits, and pretos velhos, old African spirits. These sessions often focus on healing, guidance, and moral teachings, delivered in a tone that is kind, wise, and deeply humane. To many outsiders, these rituals might seem unfamiliar or theatrical, but within Brazilian culture, they are part of a long tradition of spiritual resilience and creativity. They are also profoundly welcoming. Many Umbanda temples operate on an open-door basis. No membership required, no judgment passed. If you come with sincerity, you are received. The spirit world in Brazil is not just a belief system, it's a lived reality. People consult tarot readers, healers, and spiritual guides, not just when something goes wrong, but as part of their regular lives. Dreams are analysed for hidden meanings. A string of bad luck might lead someone to seek a spiritual cleansing. Even skeptics will occasionally knock on wood or carry a figure, a small charm shaped like a clenched fist used to ward off the evil eye. And then there's Spiritism, a philosophy that arrived from France in the 19th century, popularised by Allan Kardec. It holds that the soul is eternal, and that we are all on a journey of moral evolution through many lifetimes. Spiritist centres are common throughout Brazil, and many of them provide services like healing passes, group meditations, and charity work. The most famous spiritist in Brazilian history is perhaps Chico Xavier, a medium and writer credited with channeling dozens of books from spirits, many of which became bestsellers. What's remarkable is how all of these traditions, not just Catholicism, Candomblé, Umbanda, and Spiritism, but also evangelical Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and indigenous religions, exist side by side in a relatively tolerant atmosphere. While tensions do exist, particularly in political or doctrinal contexts, the average Brazilian often navigates multiple spiritual influences with ease. There is an openness, a curiosity, a sense that the divine wears many faces. You'll also find sacredness in unexpected places. On the beaches of Bahia, it's common to see offerings to Iemanjá, the goddess of the sea, placed in little boats and sent out on the waves. These offerings might include flowers, perfume, candles, or small tokens of gratitude. In the Amazon, shamans still perform healing rituals using plants, chants, and centuries-old knowledge passed down through generations. In the bustling streets of Salvador, you might stumble upon a capoeira circle, a blend of martial arts, dance, and spirituality that began as a form of resistance among enslaved Africans and evolved into an art form full of grace and history. In Rio de Janeiro, the giant statue of Christ the Redeemer stands with open arms atop Corcovado Mountain, a symbol not only of Christianity, but of Brazil's enduring embrace of the sacred. Visible from almost anywhere in the city, it serves as a reminder that spirituality in Brazil is both towering and tender, present in stone and in song. Even architecture tells spiritual stories. Colonial churches in towns like Ouro Preto and Paraty are richly adorned with gold leaf and intricate carvings, a blend of European style and local craftsmanship. These churches are often filled with music, not the quiet hymns you might expect, but lively rhythmic songs played on drums, guitars and tambourines. Faith here is rarely solemn. It moves, it sings, it celebrates. In the northeast, many small towns are built around a central church and plaza, where festivals, processions, and saints' days punctuate the year like rhythmic beats. During these celebrations, streets are lined with coloured paper flags, and the air smells of roasted corn and sweet cakes. People wear traditional costumes, dance for hours, and thank their saints for blessings received. It's not just a religious observance, it's a full body expression of gratitude and joy. And of course, there are the quieter moments. A grandmother lighting a candle in a hallway. A fisherman saying a silent prayer before casting his net. A child learning to recite the Lord's Prayer or the names of the Orixás. These are the soft rhythms of Brazilian spirituality, the everyday acts that don't make headlines but shape lives. In many ways, Brazil's spiritual richness is a reflection of its people, adaptable, expressive, rooted in tradition but always open to new influences. It's a culture that understands the sacred not as something distant or exclusive, but as something close, shared, and deeply human. So, whether it's a saint draped in lace, a spirit welcomed with incense, or a song offered to the sea, the spiritual landscape of Brazil invites everyone to listen, to feel, and to connect. It reminds us that the sacred can be found anywhere, in the hush of a chapel, the rhythm of a drum, or the flicker of a candle in a kitchen window. It's not just about what you believe, it's about how you live, how you treat others, and how you find meaning in the dance of the everyday. And in Brazil, the dance never really stops. Brazilian cuisine isn't just a collection of recipes, it's a map of the country's history, a storybook of migration and mingling, a sensory love letter written in spice, smoke, and sweetness. In Brazil, food is never just food. It's a memory, a ritual, a family gathering, and sometimes a quiet moment on a rainy afternoon with a hot cup of coffee and a slice of cake. It's everyday magic, delicious, comforting, and endlessly varied. You could spend a lifetime eating your way across Brazil and never get bored. That's partly because of the country's size, of course. Brazil covers more than 3 million square miles. But it's also because each region brings its own ingredients, techniques, and flavours to the table. The food of the Amazon is not the food of São Paulo, and a plate of stew in Bahia tells a very different story from a barbecue in Rio Grande do Sul. But let's begin with something that ties the whole country together: rice and beans. It might sound simple, humble even, But in Brazil, arroz com feijão is nothing short of sacred. You'll find it on nearly every table, from bustling city cafes to quiet farmhouses. The beans might change, black in Rio, brown in the northeast, red in Minas Gerais, but the idea stays the same. Fluffy white rice, simmered beans, maybe a sprinkle of farofa, more on that in a moment. And suddenly you've got a meal that nourishes both body and soul. And then there's feijoada, perhaps Brazil's most iconic dish. Rich, smoky, and deeply satisfying. It's a black bean stew, traditionally made with various cuts of pork, including, in its more traditional forms, ears, tails, and trotters. These days, many cooks opt for sausage and bacon instead, but the soul of the dish remains the same. It's a food of community, often served on Wednesdays and Saturdays in restaurants, or during long, leisurely Sunday lunches at home. Alongside the stew come rice, collard greens, slices of orange, and farofa, those golden toasted manioc crumbs that add a bit of crunch and a whole lot of comfort. Farofa deserves its own moment in the spotlight. Made from manioc flour, also known as cassava or yuca, is toasted in butter or oil, often with onions, garlic, or bits of bacon. It's not a main dish, but a beloved side scattered over beans, meat, or even eggs. Some people say it's Brazil's answer to breadcrumbs, but really it's so much more than that. It's crispy, nutty, and endlessly customizable. Like many things in Brazil, it adapts to whatever you throw at it. Manioc, by the way, is a root vegetable that plays a huge role in Brazilian cuisine. Indigenous peoples were cultivating and cooking with it long before Europeans arrived. It's incredibly versatile, used to make everything from flatbreads and cakes to stews and snacks. You'll find it in tapioca crepes, soft, chewy, and often filled with cheese or coconut, in thick porridges called pirão, and in little cheese puffs known as pão de queijo. Pão de queijo. These small golden rolls are one of Brazil's most beloved snacks. Made with manioc starch and cheese, typically Minas cheese, a mild, creamy variety. They're crisp on the outside and chewy on the inside, with a slightly tangy flavour that makes them dangerously addictive. They're eaten for breakfast, as an afternoon snack, or pretty much any time someone walks past a bakery and smells them fresh out of the oven, which is to say, often. In the state of Minas Gerais, where pão de queijo originates, food is a slow, heartfelt affair. Meals here often feature hearty stews, dense corn cakes, and soft cheeses served with guava paste, a pairing known as Romeo e Julieta. Sweet and savoury, simple and elegant, it captures the poetic spirit of the region in just 2 bites. Meanwhile, in Bahia, the food takes on the deep, complex flavours of Africa. Here, palm oil, coconut milk, and dried shrimp turn even a simple dish into something extraordinary. One of the stars of Bahian cuisine is acarajé, a deep-fried ball of black-eyed pea dough, split open and stuffed with spicy shrimp paste, salad, and hot sauce. It's crunchy, creamy, spicy, and deeply satisfying. Acarajé is sold by street vendors known as baianas, often dressed in traditional white lace dresses and head wraps, serving food that carries centuries of history in every bite. Another Bahian favourite is moqueca, a slow-cooked seafood stew made with fish or shrimp, simmered with onions, tomatoes, peppers, coconut milk, and the bright, earthy flavour of donde oil, pressed from African palm fruit. It's usually served in a clay pot, bubbling gently, and accompanied by rice and farofa. Eating moqueca feels like sitting down with the ocean itself, warm, generous, and full of flavour. Further up the coast, in the Amazon, the ingredients get even wilder. This is the land of exotic fruits, strange fish, and forest-grown flavours that rarely make it to supermarket shelves. There's tucupi, a yellow sauce made from wild manioc root, which must be carefully processed to remove its natural toxins before it becomes a savoury, tangy base for soups and stews. One of the most iconic dishes here is pato no tucupi, duck cooked in this vibrant sauce, often served with jambu, a leafy green that makes your mouth tingle with a subtle numbing sensation. Yes, really, it's like the Amazon's secret handshake. Fruits in Brazil are a chapter of their own. Some are familiar, mangoes, pineapples, papayas, but others are truly one of a kind. There's acai, of course, now a global trend, though in its original form it's less of a frozen dessert and more of a thick, earthy paste, often eaten with fish or tapioca. There's cupuaçu, a cousin of cacao with a tart, tropical flavour that's hard to describe but easy to love. There's kaju, the fruit of the cashew tree, juicy and a little astringent, used to make juice, jelly, and even a fiery liquor known as cachaça. And speaking of cachaça, Brazil's national spirit, it deserves a toast of its own. Made from fermented sugarcane juice, it's the backbone of the caipirinha, a cocktail that combines cachaça with lime, sugar, and ice. Sweet, tart, and dangerously refreshing, the caipirinha is a staple at barbecues, beach outings, and just about any occasion where music is playing and friends are near. Barbecue, or churrasco, is a tradition all its own, especially in the southern states like Rio Grande do Sul. Here, meat is more than just food. It's an art form, a ritual, and a communal event. Large cuts of beef, pork, and chicken are skewered and grilled over open flames, seasoned simply with rock salt to let the flavour of the meat shine. It's served with vinaigrette, a sort of salsa made with chopped tomatoes, onions and vinegar, farofa, and sometimes grilled cheese or garlic bread. At a proper churrascaria, waiters roam with skewers and slicing knives, offering endless servings until you beg for mercy, or at least flip your table card to red. Snacking is a way of life in Brazil. Whether it's coxinha, a teardrop-shaped fritter filled with shredded chicken and cream cheese, pastel, a crispy pastry stuffed with meat, cheese, or heart of palm, or kaibi, a Middle Eastern-inspired beef and bulgur roll. There's always something tasty to nibble on. Street food culture is vibrant, diverse, and often the best place to find authentic local flavour. And of course, there's dessert. Brazil has a serious sweet tooth, and it shows. Brigadeiros, soft chocolate truffles made with condensed milk and cocoa powder, are a staple at birthday parties and celebrations. Beijinhos, their coconut-flavoured cousins, offer a snowy contrast. Cakes come in all shapes and sizes. Fluffy cornmeal cakes, rich chocolate torts, layered confection soaked in fruit syrup or rum. There's quindim, a glossy yellow custard made with egg yolks, sugar and coconut, as bright and rich as a Brazilian sunrise. One of the loveliest things about Brazilian food is how often it's shared. Meals are rarely solitary affairs. They're served on big plates, meant to be passed around, discussed and enjoyed together. Eating in Brazil is a social event, a chance to slow down, savour the moment, and maybe tell a story or two between bites. Even breakfast, though often simple, has its charms. A cup of strong coffee, cafezinho, served sweet and hot, paired with fresh rolls, fruit, or a slice of cake. Brazilians don't always eat a large breakfast, but they make it count, especially if it's shared with good conversation and a bit of sunshine. In schools and offices, lunch is often the main meal of the day, balanced and satisfying with rice, beans, protein, vegetables, and maybe a little salad or juice. Dinner tends to be lighter, unless there's a special occasion. Then all bets are off and the grill gets fired up. But perhaps the best way to understand Brazilian cuisine is to think of it not as a menu, but as a feeling. It's the warm scent of stew drifting from a grandmother's kitchen, the clatter of forks and laughter at a family table, the paper napkin wrapped around a pastel at a bustling market, the sizzle of meat, the chill of a caipirinha, the sweetness of a brigadeiro melting on your tongue. It's food that tells stories of indigenous wisdom, African resilience, European adaptation, and modern creativity. It's comfort and celebration, ritual and reinvention. And no matter where you are in Brazil, no matter the region or the recipe, there's one ingredient that's always present: generosity. Because in Brazil, a good meal isn't just something you eat, it's something you share, something you remember, something that stays with you long after the plate is empty. In Brazil, music isn't just background noise, it's a living, breathing part of the culture. It drifts through the windows of apartment buildings, pulses from beachside bars, echoes in subway tunnels, and rises up from village squares. It's sung to babies in hammocks, danced to by grandparents in plazas, and blasted from speakers at weddings, protests, football matches, and of course, Carnival. Music in Brazil isn't a pastime, it's a heartbeat. That heartbeat takes many forms. Brazil's musical heritage is one of the richest and most varied in the world, shaped by indigenous rhythms, African percussion, European melody, and the everyday improvisations of a people who know how to find beauty in the ordinary. To understand Brazil's soul, you have to listen to the strings, the drums, the voices, and the silence between them. Let's begin with the genre most famously tied to the country, samba. If Brazil had a national soundtrack, samba would be its leading track. Born in the early 20th century in the Afro-Brazilian communities of Rio de Janeiro, samba is the child of African rhythms and Brazilian street culture. Its roots stretch back even further to the music brought over by enslaved Africans and blended with local traditions and instruments. Samba is usually played with a variety of percussion instruments, surdo drums, pandeiros, tamborims, and agogos, creating a complex, irresistible rhythm. On top of this pulse, you might hear guitars, cavaquinhos, a small four-stringed instrument similar to a ukulele, and vocals that range from joyful to heartbreakingly soulful. Samba is dance music, but it's also poetry. Its lyrics often tell stories of love, loss, struggle, resilience, and community. Always with a certain swing, a certain smile, even in sorrow. And then there's the samba school, Escola de Samba, a cultural institution in many Brazilian neighbourhoods. These aren't schools in the academic sense, but community groups that come together year-round to rehearse music, dance, and build elaborate floats for Carnival. They are centres of creativity and pride, places where entire communities gather to create something larger than life. The yearly competition between samba schools during Carnival is a dazzling spectacle of feathers, glitter, storytelling, and fierce musical talent. But samba is just the beginning. Brazil has a symphony of musical genres, each with its own story to tell. Take bossa nova, for instance. If samba is the exuberant street parade, bossa nova is the quiet conversation on a moonlit balcony. Emerging in the late 1950s, bossa nova was the invention of artists like João Gilberto, Antonio Carlos Jobim, and Vinicius de Moraes. It took the rhythmic roots of samba and smoothed them into something gentle, introspective, and sophisticated. With its subtle guitar patterns, soft vocals, and jazz-inspired harmonies, bossa nova was both groundbreaking and utterly soothing. Perhaps the most famous bossa nova song of all time is Garota de Ipanema, The Girl from Ipanema. Sung in both Portuguese and English by artists like Astrud Gilberto and Stan Getz, the song became an international sensation. But bossa nova, for all its global fame, remains an intimate art form in Brazil, a genre best appreciated in small cafes, quiet beaches, and the hearts of romantics. Now head north to the northeast of Brazil, and you'll find forró. Born in the rural areas of states like Pernambuco and Paraíba, forró is the sound of festivals, weddings, and country dances. It features the accordion, the triangle, and the zabumba, a type of bass drum. The rhythm is fast, infectious, and made for dancing, usually in pairs, close and rhythmic. The lyrics often deal with themes of love, longing, and life in the sertão, or backcountry. During the Festa Junina, a midsummer festival held in honour of saints like St. John, towns all over the northeast light bonfires, hang colourful flags, and dance to forró late into the night. People dress in traditional rural attire, straw hats, checked shirts, flouncy skirts, and celebrate with a mix of nostalgia and joy. The music at these festivals isn't just entertainment, it's a cultural memory kept alive with every step. Move into the interior, and you might stumble upon sertanejo, Brazil's version of country music. Originating in the rural southeast and central west, sertanejo has evolved from simple guitar-driven ballads to slick pop anthems that dominate radio charts. It's hugely popular across Brazil, especially in small towns and agricultural regions, where its themes of love, heartbreak, and rural life strike a deep chord. And then there's MPB, Música Popular Brasileira, or Brazilian popular music. This isn't a single genre, so much as a movement that emerged in the 1960s, blending traditional Brazilian styles with global influences like jazz, rock, and folk. Artists like Caetano Veloso, Gilberto Gil, Gal Costa, and Chico Buarque used MPB as a way to express political dissent, cultural pride, and artistic innovation. MPB is cerebral and emotional, poetic and provocative, a genre for thinking, feeling, and singing along. In more recent decades, Brazil has seen an explosion of urban genres that reflect the complexity of modern life. Funk karaoke, often just called funk, is one such genre. Despite the name, it's very different from American funk. Funk karaoke was born in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro and mixes electronic beats, rap, and samples, often with bold, provocative lyrics. It's controversial at times, celebrated at others, but always deeply tied to the realities of urban life in Brazil. Its energy, its inequality, its creativity. Funk parties, or bales, are a central part of youth culture in many neighbourhoods. And while the genre has faced criticism for its explicit content, it has also been recognised as a powerful form of expression for marginalised communities, a way to tell stories that might otherwise be ignored. Meanwhile, in São Paulo and other large cities, hip-hop has grown into a major cultural force. Brazilian rap often tackles social issues, racism, poverty, violence and politics, using sharp lyrics and strong beats to demand attention. Artists like Raciones MCs have become legends, speaking truth to power through rhythm and rhyme. Electronic music also has a strong presence, especially in the South, where festivals draw huge crowds, and DJs spin everything from house to techno to Brazilian-infused dance beats. And let's not forget axe, pagode, brega, and a host of other genres that defy easy classification but keep dance floors packed and spirits high. Music in Brazil doesn't live only in clubs or concert halls. It's everywhere. On street corners, in public squares, on buses, in markets, at the beach. It's played on instruments, sung by voices, tapped out on tabletops, and danced in bare feet. Children learn rhythm before they learn arithmetic. Guitars are passed around like bread. Voices harmonise naturally, often without anyone being asked to join in. If there's a silence in Brazil, it's only a pause before the next chorus begins. The instruments themselves tell stories. The berimbau, a single-string percussion instrument used in capoeira, creates a haunting bending sound that has much movement as music. The cuica, a friction drum, produces that distinctive squeaky sound you often hear in samba. It's the sonic version of laughter. There's the pandeiro, a hand drum that combines rhythm and melody. The 7-string guitar, the cavaquinho, the reco-reco. Each instrument contributes its own voice to the Brazilian songbook. Music is also how Brazil remembers. Folk songs tell stories of colonial struggle, indigenous resistance, and the lives of enslaved people. Protest songs from the military dictatorship era still carry emotional weight. Lullabies and work songs, passed down through generations, keep history alive in melody. A single tune can transport you to another time, another place, or into the arms of a childhood memory. At the same time, music in Brazil is always evolving. Young artists sample old records, remix traditional rhythms, and create entirely new sounds. It's a musical culture that honours its past but doesn't get stuck there. Tradition is not a cage, it's a launching pad. And no conversation about Brazilian music would be complete without mentioning Carnival. The explosion of sound, colour, dance, and joy that takes over cities every year is powered by music. Samba enredos, theme songs composed by samba schools, are crafted with precision and passion, designed to tell elaborate stories through rhythm and verse. For weeks, months even, people prepare for those magical days when the music spills into the streets and the whole country seems to sway in time. But even outside of Carnival, there's a music for every moment. A soft corinho for a rainy afternoon. A fiery forró for a festival night. A bittersweet modinha for the lovesick. A street corner batucada when the neighbourhood gets restless. In Brazil, music is emotion translated into sound, and there's a tune for every feeling. It's not about perfection. Voices crack, rhythms drift, strings break, but the music never stops. It's a living thing, messy and beautiful, just like the people who make it. And whether you're sitting quietly with your thoughts or dancing with a crowd of strangers, the music of Brazil has a way of finding you, tapping you on the shoulder, inviting you to listen, to move, to feel. Because in Brazil, music is more than art. It's a language, a conversation, a way of life. And if you listen closely, you'll hear that it's not just playing from speakers or stages. It's echoing in the streets, in the stories, and in the hearts of everyone who calls this vibrant land home. Brazil doesn't just express itself through music and food, it tells stories through colour, texture, and form. From towering murals on city walls to tiny beads threaded into intricate patterns, the spirit of Brazil lives in its art. This is a country where creativity doesn't sit quietly in a gallery. It spills out into the streets, climbs onto buildings, dances across carnival floats, and curls its way into the curves of architecture and the folds of fabric. Art in Brazil is as alive as the rainforest and as layered as its history. Brazilian visual culture is wonderfully hard to pin down. It's not one thing, it's a kaleidoscope. That's because Brazil's art has been shaped by so many hands over the centuries. Indigenous artists using natural pigments on cave walls, African artisans working with wood and cloth, European trained painters capturing colonial life, and modern visionaries reimagining space and structure. Let's begin with the earliest artists, the indigenous peoples who have lived in what is now Brazil for tens of thousands of years. Long before the arrival of the Portuguese, indigenous communities were painting, carving, and crafting with astonishing detail and purpose. Some of Brazil's oldest artworks can be found in Serra da Capivara National Park in the state of Piauí, where prehistoric rock paintings stretch across caves and cliff faces. These images of animals, humans, rituals, and daily life are some of the oldest in the Americas, and they offer a glimpse into a creative world that existed long before the concept of Brazil was even imagined. Today, indigenous art remains a vital part of Brazil's cultural landscape. Many indigenous groups continue to produce pottery, baskets, feather headdresses, body paint, and ceremonial masks using traditional techniques passed down through generations. These works are not only beautiful, they are deeply meaningful, often tied to spiritual beliefs, oral histories, and the rhythms of nature. In recent years, contemporary indigenous artists have begun to gain national and international recognition, blending ancestral wisdom with modern themes to make powerful statements about identity, land, and resistance. With the arrival of the Portuguese in the 16th century, Brazilian art began to absorb European influences. The colonial period saw the construction of ornate Baroque churches, particularly in the state of Minas Gerais, where towns like Ouro Preto became centres of religious and artistic expression. These churches were decorated with elaborate wood carvings, gold leaf, and paintings that told biblical stories in grand, dramatic fashion. Perhaps the most famous artist of this era was Antonio Francisco Lisboa, better known as Aleijadinho, the Little Cripple. Despite a debilitating illness that left him without fingers or toes, he created some of the most iconic sculptures and architectural elements of colonial Brazil, blending European Baroque style with a uniquely Brazilian flair. As Brazil moved into the 19th and early 20th centuries, its art began to shift once again. Romantic painters like Victor Mirel and Pedro Américo captured historical scenes and idealized landscapes, painting grand battle scenes and noble portraits that sought to define a national identity. But by the time the modernist wave arrived in the 1920s, many artists were eager to break away from European traditions and find a distinctly Brazilian voice. The turning point came with the Semana de Arte Moderna, the Week of Modern Art, held in São Paulo in 1922. It was a cultural explosion. Poets, painters, musicians, and thinkers came together to challenge the old order and celebrate Brazilian creativity in all its chaotic, colourful glory. Among them were artists like Anita Malfatti, Tarsila do Amaral, and D. Cavalcanti, who used bold colours, abstract forms, and tropical imagery to create something entirely new. Tarsila do Amaral, in particular, is often considered the mother of Brazilian modernism. Her paintings, like the iconic Abaporu, which shows a surreal, elongated figure with a tiny head and enormous foot, were inspired by the landscapes and people of Brazil, as well as indigenous and Afro-Brazilian culture. She was part of the anthropophagia, or cannibalist movement, which playfully suggested that Brazilian artists should devour European influences and transform them into something local and fresh. It was a cheeky, rebellious idea, and it helped redefine what Brazilian art could be. Around the same time, architecture in Brazil was undergoing its own transformation. Enter Oscar Niemeyer, the visionary behind Brasilia, Brazil's modernist capital. Niemeyer's buildings are unlike anything else in the world. They curve, swoop, and float with an elegance that feels more like sculpture than construction. His National Congress building, with its twin towers and bowl-like domes, is instantly recognizable. So is the Cathedral of Brasilia, which looks like a crown made of concrete and stained glass. Niemeyer believed that architecture should be sensual, and his buildings reflect that belief. They're graceful, imaginative, and defiantly unconventional. Modern Brazilian architecture wasn't just about aesthetics. It was also about optimism. The design of Brasilia, with its clean lines and futuristic vision, was meant to symbolise a new era of progress and possibility. And while the city has its critics, there's no denying its place in the story of Brazilian creativity. But not all of Brazil's art lives in galleries or government buildings. In fact, some of the most exciting, raw, and honest expressions of creativity can be found on the streets. Brazil has a thriving street art scene, especially in cities like São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, where graffiti and muralism have become powerful tools for communication, protest, and identity. In São Paulo, the neighbourhood of Vila Madalena is practically an open-air museum, with entire alleys transformed into swirling canvases of colour. One of the most famous artists to emerge from this scene is Eduardo Cobra, whose massive murals of historical figures and kaleidoscopic patterns now grace walls around the world. Cobra's style is instantly recognisable, vivid, geometric, and emotionally charged. But he's just one voice among many in Brazil's urban art community, where political slogans, portraits, and abstract designs coexist in a visual dialogue with the city itself. This connection between art and activism is deeply embedded in Brazilian culture. During times of political unrest, artists have used their work to speak out, challenge authority, and imagine alternative futures. Posters, performance art, puppetry, and poetry have all played roles in Brazil's long tradition of cultural resistance. And art isn't just something created by professionals. It's a part of daily life. Folk art, or artesanato, is everywhere, and it's often handmade, functional, and deeply personal. In the northeast, you'll find clay figurines from Caruaru and hand-stitched quilts from the Sertão. In the Amazon, woven baskets and beadwork tell stories of forest life. In Bahia, colourful ribbons called fitas are tied to church gates and wrists, each knot representing a wish. These objects may be small, but they carry big meaning. They're tokens of culture, symbols of place, and often pass from one generation to the next. Even Carnival, Brazil's most famous festival, is a masterpiece of collective artistry. Each samba school spends the year designing costumes, floats, and themes that rival Broadway productions in scale and imagination. Feathers, sequins, papier-mâché dragons, spinning platforms, and glittering mosaics turn the streets into a moving, breathing gallery of joy. It's the ultimate example of art as celebration, and celebration as art. And then there's fashion. Brazilian designers draw inspiration from the country's natural beauty, urban energy, and multicultural roots. Bright colours, flowing fabrics, and playful prints dominate the style scene. From beachwear in Rio to haute couture in São Paulo, Brazilian fashion is bold, expressive, and unafraid to stand out. Art in Brazil isn't just something to look at, it's something to live in, wear, carry, and feel. It's in the ceramics that hold your coffee, the song lyrics painted on a wall, the jewellery crafted from seeds and shells. It's in the design of a chair, the shape of a window, the way a child draws a sun with a smiling face. It's this everyday creativity that gives Brazilian culture its particular spark. There's a sense that beauty is not a luxury, it's a necessity. A way to survive, to resist, to celebrate, to connect. It's in the chalk drawings on a sidewalk, the face painted for a parade, the handmade kite flying over a favela. Art is everywhere because people are everywhere, and people in Brazil are endlessly creative. So whether it's a 16th century statue, a 21st century mural, or a clay rooster perched on someone's kitchen shelf, Brazilian art invites you in. It asks you to look closely, to feel deeply, and maybe to dance a little while you're at it. It's not about perfection, it's about expression. About taking what you have, paint, wood, fabric, rhythm, memory, and turning it into something that speaks, even if it doesn't say a word, because in Brazil, art isn't an extra. It's essential. It's the fingerprint of a people, colourful, complex, and utterly unique. When the sun sets and the bustle of the day quiets, there's something about Brazil that comes even more alive, not in noise, but in story. Beneath the thrum of samba drums and behind the brushstrokes of colourful murals, Brazil is, at its heart, a nation of storytellers. Whether whispered by firelight, read aloud under a mosquito net, or scribbled in the back of a worn notebook, Brazilian stories have a way of lingering. They stretch across time, echo through generations, and sparkle like fireflies in the country's long, warm nights. Let's begin, as all good stories do, with the oral traditions. Long before the printing press or published novels, stories in Brazil lived on tongues and travelled through time by way of voice. Indigenous peoples across Brazil have passed down myths and legends for thousands of years. Tales of creation, spirits, animals, rivers, and stars. These stories are not simply entertainment. They are blueprints for living. They explain the origins of things, define relationships between people and nature, and offer lessons about courage, humility, and respect. In the Amazon, you might hear of the curupira, a mischievous forest guardian with backward-facing feet who confuses hunters and protects the animals of the jungle. Or of Yara, the river mermaid with long hair and a haunting song who lures listeners into the depths. These are not just bedtime stories. They are warnings, blessings, and maps of an unseen world that still pulses just beneath the surface. And then there are the contadores de historias, the storytellers, often elders, who gather children in circles and bring characters to life with just their voices and hands. These storytellers are libraries in human form, and their tales blend indigenous, African, and European roots into narratives that are uniquely Brazilian. Through them, entire communities stay connected to the past while making sense of the present. As Brazil evolved, so did its literature. When the Portuguese arrived in the 16th century, they brought with them their language and their literary traditions. The earliest written texts in Brazil were often colonial reports or religious tracts. But by the 18th and 19th centuries, Brazilian writers began crafting works that reflected their own land, people, and perspectives. Romanticism took root, full of emotion, nationalism, and lush descriptions of Brazil's dramatic landscapes. One of the standout figures from this period was José de Alencar. His novels, like Iracema and O Guarani, romanticized indigenous characters and helped shape a national literary identity. While modern readers might critique his idealized portrayals, his work was groundbreaking in its attempt to centre Brazil, rather than Europe, as the heart of the narrative. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Brazilian literature took on new forms and new courage. The rise of realism, modernism, and regionalism brought with it a wave of writers who explored the complexities of Brazilian life, its beauty, its injustice, its humour, and its contradictions. One of the towering figures of this era was Machado de Assis. Born in Rio de Janeiro in the 19th century, Machado was the son of a mulatto house painter and a washerwoman. He had little formal education and suffered from epilepsy, but he became one of the most sophisticated literary voices of his time. His novels, particularly Dom Casmurro and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, are witty, ironic, and psychologically rich. Machado explored themes of identity, hypocrisy, and the quiet cruelties of everyday life. He played with narrative structure, often addressing the reader directly or twisting timelines like a literary magician. Though admired in Brazil, Machado de Assis remained relatively unknown abroad for many years. But in recent decades, international critics have begun to recognize him as one of the great novelists of the 19th century, right up there with Dostoevsky, Austen, and Flaubert. As the 20th century unfolded, Brazilian literature exploded with variety and vitality. Graciliano Ramos captured the harsh realities of drought-stricken northeastern Brazil in Vidas Secas, a stark and haunting novel about a family trying to survive in the Sertão. Jorge Amado, on the other hand, filled his stories with sensuality, humour, and social critique. His novels, like Gabriela, Clove and Cinnamon, and Donaflor, and her two husbands, often take place in Bahia and celebrate Afro-Brazilian culture while exposing the absurdities of class and politics. Then there's Clarice Lispector, one of the most singular literary voices to ever come out of Brazil, or anywhere, really. Born in Ukraine but raised in Recife, Clarice wrote novels and short stories that feel more like meditations than narratives. Her prose is introspective, poetic, and often deeply mysterious. In books like The Hour of the Star and Agua Viva, she dives into the inner lives of her characters with such intensity that reading her work can feel like listening to your own thoughts. But translated into poetry, Clarice didn't care much for traditional plot. She was more interested in the shape of silence, the texture of time, the invisible threads that bind a person to the world. Her writing challenges you to read slowly, to listen between the lines, and to accept that not all stories have neat endings. Of course, Brazilian literature isn't confined to the past. Contemporary authors continue to build on this rich legacy while exploring new themes and forms. Writers like Milton Hatum, from the Amazonian city of Manaus, explore the complexities of family and identity in multicultural Brazil. Conceição Evaristo, an Afro-Brazilian writer and activist, weaves powerful tales of black womanhood, memory and resistance. Daniel Mundruku, an Indigenous author and educator, shares stories that bring Indigenous perspectives to a broader audience, challenging readers to rethink history and embrace diversity. Brazilian literature has always been multilingual, even if most of it is written in Portuguese. Many authors incorporate indigenous languages, African dialects, and regional slang into their work. This linguistic richness mirrors the cultural diversity of the country itself and gives the writing a rhythm and flavour that's unmistakably Brazilian. Beyond novels and short stories, poetry thrives in Brazil. From the sensual verses of Vinicius de Moraes to the social critiques of Carlos Drummond de Andrade, poetry has long served as a vehicle for both romance and revolution. Spoken word poetry is increasingly popular among Brazil's youth, especially in urban centres where poets perform in sarau gatherings, informal poetry slams held in cafes, public squares, and living rooms. Children's literature also plays a vital role. Books by authors like Ana Maria Machado and Ruth Rocha are beloved by generations and help young readers explore values like empathy, courage, and curiosity. Many children grow up listening to the adventures of Sítio do Pica-Pau Amarelo, a whimsical series by Monteiro Lobato that combines Brazilian folklore with fairy tale magic. And let's not forget the power of popular storytelling. Brazil has a long tradition of caudal literature, small pamphlet-style booklets of poetry and stories, often illustrated with woodcut prints. Originating in the northeast, caudal poems are usually written in rhyme and sold at markets or fairs, where they might be sung, recited, or performed. They cover everything from love stories and historical tales to current events and moral lessons. The name cordel means string, because the booklets are often hung on strings in stalls. Simple, portable, and deeply rooted in oral tradition, cordel is folk literature at its finest. What's striking about all these literary forms is how much they reflect Brazil's deeper rhythms, its mix of melancholy and joy, its blend of realism and dream, its desire to remember while always moving forward. There's a Brazilian word, saudade, that captures this perfectly. It's a feeling of longing, nostalgia, and sweet sadness all rolled into one. Many Brazilian stories are steeped in saudade. They yearn, they ache, they shimmer with memory. Books in Brazil aren't just read, they're felt. And while not everyone has access to libraries or bookstores, the culture of storytelling persists. It flows through family dinners, neighbourhood gatherings, radio shows, and school performances. It lives in lullabies, in street theatre, in that friend who always has a tale to tell, whether or not it's entirely true. Because in the end, Brazilian literature isn't confined to pages. It lives in the air. It rides on the backs of motorbikes, whispers from the stalls of street vendors, and watches from windowsills in the late afternoon light. It's the story of a people who have seen a lot, felt even more, and somehow always find a way to turn life into something beautiful. Word by word, verse by verse, dream by dream. In Brazil, play is serious business. Not in the grim, nose to the grindstone sense, but in the way a dancer might take joy seriously, rehearsing for hours only to make it all look effortless. Movement in Brazil is more than exercise or competition. It's tradition, it's pride, it's rhythm, and it's a language in its own right. Whether it's a 10-year-old juggling a football on a cobblestone street or a grandparent dancing forró in a plaza, Brazil knows how to move and how to celebrate movement in all its forms. Let's start with football, or as it's called in Brazil, futebol. It's often described as a national obsession, but that feels too clinical. It's more like a collective heartbeat. From the sandy beaches of Rio de Janeiro to the hilly neighbourhoods of Belo Horizonte, football is everywhere. It's not confined to stadiums or school fields. It happens wherever there's a bit of open space and something even vaguely spherical. Flip-flops become goalposts. Soda cans become balls. And somehow, despite the odds, grace emerges. Brazil is home to some of the most legendary names in football history. Pelé, often called the greatest footballer of all time, scored over 1,000 goals in his career and won 3 World Cups with the national team. Then there's Garrincha, the mischievous dribbler, whose bowed legs and unorthodox play made him beloved across the country. In more recent years, stars like Romario, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Marta, and Neymar have continued the tradition of turning sport into art. The Brazilian style of play is famously creative. It's sometimes called jogo bonito, the beautiful game. It emphasizes flair, improvisation, and joy. Watching a Brazilian team in full flow is like watching a samba parade on grass, unpredictable, rhythmic, and alive. But the magic doesn't just live in professional stadiums. It's born in the Peladas. Casual street matches where barefoot kids learn control, balance, and style before they have even figured out multiplication. And it's not just for the boys. Women's football in Brazil has grown rapidly, despite decades of neglect. For a long time, female players were barred from playing professionally, but pioneers like Marta Vieira da Silva, 6-time FIFA World Player of the Year, have shattered barriers and brought global recognition to the women's game. Today, more girls in Brazil are playing football than ever before, and their rise feels inevitable. Yet football, dominant as it is just one thread in Brazil's rich tapestry of play. There's another movement that's even older and just as mesmerizing, capoeira. Developed by enslaved Africans in Brazil as a disguised form of resistance, capoeira is a fusion of martial arts, dance, music, and ritual. Its movements are graceful and acrobatic. Low spins, high kicks, and evasive flourishes that look choreographed but are entirely spontaneous. A typical capoeira match, or jogo, take place in a circle called a roda. Participants take turns playing in the centre, while others clap, sing, and play traditional instruments like the berimbau, a single-stringed bow that produces a hypnotic twang. The objective isn't to land hits, but to outwit and outdance your partner. It's a game of strategy, rhythm, and mutual respect. Capoeira isn't just a sport, it's a cultural legacy. It was once criminalised in Brazil, seen as a threat by the authorities. Practitioners were forced to disguise their training as harmless folk dancing. Today, it's celebrated as a symbol of Afro-Brazilian identity and resilience, taught in schools, cultural centres, and academies across the country. Some learn it for the exercise, others learn it for the heritage. Many learn it for the sheer joy of moving in a way that feels like music made flesh. Now, Travel a bit further south, where the surf curls in perfect arcs along the Atlantic coastline. Brazil has become a world leader in surfing, producing champions like Gabriel Medina and Italo Ferreira, who've taken top titles in international competitions. Surfing here isn't just about chasing waves, it's about a connection to the ocean, to rhythm, and to self. It's meditative, exhilarating, and distinctly Brazilian in its emphasis on flow over force. Beach culture in general plays a massive role in Brazilian recreation. Volleyball, for example, is practically a requirement if you live near the coast. Beach volleyball was practically invented in Brazil, or at least perfected there, with locals playing casual matches in the sand long before it became an Olympic sport. Brazil has claimed numerous Olympic medals in both men's and women's volleyball, and the game is a staple of weekend relaxation. There's also a uniquely Brazilian hybrid called futevôlei, a combination of football and volleyball. Players keep the ball airborne using only their feet, heads and chests, volleying it back and forth over a net. It's fast, technical, and jaw-droppingly difficult. But somehow the players make it look like second nature. Watching two friends volley a football back and forth with nothing but their bodies, smiling the entire time, is the kind of thing that makes you wonder why this isn't an Olympic event yet. Further inland, you'll find a different kind of athletic culture, one rooted in the traditions of the gauchos, the South American cowboys of southern Brazil. In the state of Rio Grande do Sul, horseback riding, rodeos, and traditional contests of skill are central to local identity. One popular sport is laço comprido, a test of a rider's ability to lasso a wooden steer at full gallop. It's a nod to the agricultural history of the region, and still a vibrant part of local festivals and gatherings. In these parts, you're just as likely to find people participating in boccia, similar to buckyball, or truco, a raucous card game that involves as much bluffing and shouting as actual playing. These quieter, less physical games are also part of Brazil's playful spirit, bringing people together around simple shared joys. And then there's dance, a form of movement that blurs the line between sport and art. Brazil is home to dozens of distinct dance styles, from the sensual sway of samba to the spirited footwork of forró. Dance is often woven into celebrations, but it's also a kind of athleticism. Anyone who spent more than 10 minutes trying to learn samba steps can tell you, it's a full-body workout. And yet, for many Brazilians, dancing doesn't feel like exercise, it feels like freedom. Forró in particular is beloved in the Northeast. It's a partner dance that's close, rhythmic, and full of small syncopated steps. The music, driven by accordion, triangle, and zabumba drum, is infectious. At a forró party, people of all ages pair off, swap partners, laugh, and dance until the sun comes up. There's no scoreboard, no trophies, just joy. Meanwhile, in urban centres, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has grown from a niche martial art into an international phenomenon. Developed in the 20th century and popularised by the Gracie family, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu emphasises ground fighting and submission holds, using leverage and technique to overcome strength. It's now practised around the world, but in Brazil, it retains a kind of spiritual home. Gyms across the country train kids and adults alike, many of whom find in the sport a sense of discipline, purpose, and community. Recreation also extends into Brazil's outdoor spaces, which are vast and varied. Hiking, kayaking, rock climbing, and cycling are popular in regions like Chapada Diamantina, the Serra do Mar, and the Pantanal. Ecotourism has blossomed in recent decades, with travellers and locals alike embracing Brazil's incredible biodiversity through adventure sports that offer both thrill and appreciation of nature. And of course, there's the national tradition of simply playing. You'll see it in children skipping rope on a city sidewalk, in teenagers practicing skateboard tricks in a public plaza, and in families flying kites, pipas, from the rooftops of favelas. These everyday games don't require gear, gyms, or fanfare. Just a bit of space, a dash of imagination, and maybe someone to cheer you on. The value of play in Brazil isn't just cultural, it's educational. Many schools emphasise physical education not just as a class, but as a form of expression and development. Kids are encouraged to move, to explore, to dance, to invent. Sports become a way of building character and learning life skills, cooperation, creativity, resilience. There's also a deeply social aspect to it all. Brazilians are, by and large, communal people. Sport is rarely solitary. Whether it's a team game or a one-on-one sparring match, the emphasis is on connection. Even competition carries a certain camaraderie. Victories are shared, losses come with hugs and laughter, and if there's ever a disagreement on the field, you can usually count on a cold drink and a conversation to smooth things over. In Brazil, play is not just for the young. Elderly people in Brazil often remain remarkably active, taking part in group walks, dance classes, and even competitive sports. In many communities, local governments support free programs that encourage seniors to stay fit and social. It's common to see older adults playing volleyball on the beach or dancing Zumba in the park, proving that movement really is a lifelong affair. Whether it's a football kicked across a favela, a dancer's spin in a carnival parade, or a quiet afternoon game of dominoes under a tree, Brazil moves with purpose and passion. The country's spirit of play is more than just recreation. It's resilience. It's a way to cope with challenge, to express identity, to connect with others, and to celebrate life in all its chaotic, colourful glory. Because in Brazil, to move is to live, and to live fully and joyfully is to never stop playing. In Brazil, a year isn't measured only in days and months. It's measured in music, fireworks, and the aroma of grilled corn in the air. It flows from Carnival to Christmas in a long procession of colours, candles, and costume changes. Here, festivals and feasts aren't just events on a calendar. They are the glue of community, the canvas of culture, and sometimes the necessary excuse to dance in the streets until the sun rises. Brazil doesn't just celebrate, it revels. Let's begin with the grandest of them all, Carnival, or as Brazilians spell it, Carnival. It is not merely a party, it is the party. A crescendo of creativity and emotion that explodes across the country in the days before Lent. Though rooted in Christian tradition, specifically the idea of indulging before a time of sacrifice, Carnival in Brazil has evolved into something much broader, a national release valve, an unapologetic celebration of life. In Rio de Janeiro, Carnival is an art form meticulously crafted and wildly expressive. Months before the festivities, samba schools across the city begin building floats, sewing sequined costumes, and choreographing performances. These schools are not classrooms in the traditional sense. They're community hubs, often based in working-class neighbourhoods, where art, dance and music blend into something transcendent. Each school selects a theme, sometimes historical, sometimes fantastical, and crafts a parade with elaborate floats, dancers, musicians, and a signature samba song called an enredo. When Carnival arrives, these schools compete in the Sambadrome, a purpose-built stadium that functions like a giant catwalk for floats. The result is a surreal display of feathers, glitter, and joy so overwhelming that it might make you question whether you've been living life too quietly. But Carnival doesn't belong to Rio alone. In Salvador, Bahia, the rhythms are different. The celebration here takes to the streets in the form of blocos afros and trios electricos, huge sound trucks topped with bands that weave through crowds of dancing people. The music pulses with Afro-Brazilian beats, axe, samba reggae and pagode, blaring over neighbourhoods in waves. The dancing is less choreographed and more visceral, more communal. It's music you don't just hear, you feel it in your ribcage. Then there's Olinda and Recife, cities in the northeast where Carnival is deeply tied to folk traditions. Here, the streets fill with the fast, brassy beats of frevo, a genre as acrobatic as it is upbeat. Dancers in colourful costumes wield tiny parasols and kick their legs in manic, joyful bursts. Oversized puppets, bonicos gigantes, loom above the crowd, their papier-mâché faces frozen in permanent glee. It's a quirky, joyous spectacle that feels both centuries old and brand new. For many Brazilians, Carnival isn't something you attend, it's something you become. Costumes are often homemade, witty, and proudly absurd. There's a spirit of satire and humour in the air, with people dressing as celebrities, political figures, or puns made flesh. Everyone, it seems, is in on the joke. And just when you think Brazil might take a breather after Carnival, June rolls around. And with it, Festa Junina. Where Carnival is glitter, Festa Junina is gingham. This celebration honours 3 Catholic saints, Anthony, John and Peter, but also pays homage to Brazil's rural roots. Especially in the northeast, it's a beloved holiday filled with music, dance and enough food to satisfy a small village. During June, schools and towns transform into makeshift country villages. Straw hats and plaid shirts become everyday wear, and public squares are strung with colourful paper flags. People gather around bonfires to dance the quadrilla, a choreographed folk dance that tells the story of a rustic wedding, complete with comedic mishaps, swooning brides, and reluctant grooms. It's part square dance, part play, part communal giggle. The music is driven by accordion, triangle, and a zabumba drum, fast-paced rhythms that make up Foro, the soundtrack of the festa. You'll find couples dancing close, spinning gently, laughing into each other's shoulders. The dance is simple to learn but endlessly expressive, a perfect match for the down-to-earth charm of the festival. And then there's the food. Festa Junina is a culinary carnival in its own right, featuring dishes made from corn, peanuts, cassava, and coconut. There's pamonha, a kind of tamale made with sweet corn paste and wrapped in husks. There's canjica, a sweet porridge made from hominy and coconut milk, and pé de moleque, a chewy peanut brittle that sticks to your teeth in the best possible way. The drinks flow too, especially quentão, a hot spiced beverage made with ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and either cachaça or red wine. It warms the belly and the soul. Beyond the major celebrations, Brazil's calendar is dotted with regional festivals that reflect the country's vast diversity. In the Amazon, for example, there's the Festival of Parintins, held every June in the state of Amazonas. is a vibrant contest between two folkloric teams, Garantido and Caprichoso, who each present elaborate performances based on indigenous myths, regional legends, and Amazonian culture. The festival culminates in a kind of theatrical showdown, where each side tells its story through dance, costume, and music. The colours are dazzling, the stakes are high, and the pride is palpable. In the south, particularly in cities with German heritage like Blumenau, you'll find Oktoberfest celebrations that blend Brazilian spirit with Bavarian tradition. Picture beer steins clinking to the beat of sambified polka, while locals dance in lederhosen and dirndls, pausing only to enjoy hearty sausages and sauerkraut with a Brazilian twist. Brazil also takes its Catholic heritage seriously, and many of the country's festivals reflect a deep religious devotion. One of the most important is the Chirio de Nazaré, held every October in the city of Belém. This is one of the largest Catholic processions in the world, drawing millions of pilgrims who come to honour Our Lady of Nazareth. The faithful walk through the city, many barefoot, following a statue of the Virgin Mary on a grand float. The atmosphere is both reverent and jubilant, a mix of prayer, song, and community. In the northeast city of Juazeiro do Norte, another pilgrimage unfolds, this time in honour of Padre Cicero, a beloved priest and folk saint. Thousands of devotees travel by foot, bus, and bike to visit his tomb and seek blessings. The air is filled with incense, music, and whispered prayers. It's not just a religious event, it's a deep expression of collective identity and hope. And then, of course, there's New Year's Eve, or Réveillon. In Rio de Janeiro, more than 2 million people gather on Copacabana Beach dressed in white, a colour symbolising peace and renewal. As midnight approaches, they light candles, make offerings to the sea goddess Yemanja, and throw white flowers into the waves. Fireworks explode over the ocean in a spectacle of light, and strangers hug like old friends. It's a moment of shared reflection and celebration, a way of letting go and beginning again. The offering to Yemanja, by the way, isn't just limited to New Year's Eve. On February 2nd, particularly in Salvador and along the Bahian coast, thousands gather for Festa de Yemanja, carrying gifts of perfume, jewellery, and flowers to the sea. Dressed in white and blue, they wade into the surf, place their offerings in small boats, and hope the ocean carries their wishes far. It's a celebration rooted in candomblé, an Afro-Brazilian spiritual tradition, and it reflects the country's deep reverence for water, memory, and ancestry. Even Brazil's smaller traditions carry big meanings. In São Paulo, for instance, there's Virada Cultural, an annual 24-hour cultural marathon that turns the city into a living, breathing festival of art, music, theatre, and dance. Museums stay open all night. Concerts pop up in unexpected places. People nap on benches between poetry readings and samba shows. It's chaotic, generous, and completely irresistible. Food, naturally, is never far from any of these celebrations. Whether it's grilled meat sizzling on a backyard churrasco or pots of feijoada simmering for a family feast, Brazilian gatherings revolve around the table as much as they do around the music. To eat together is to be together, and to share food is to share joy. No matter where you are in Brazil, or what time of year it is, chances are good that something is being celebrated. A saint, a season, a harvest, a memory, a football victory, a wedding, a Thursday. The line between sacred and secular is beautifully blurred, and the invitation is almost always open. This abundance of celebration isn't accidental. In a country that has faced and continues to face significant challenges, economic inequality, political turmoil, and social injustice, celebration becomes an act of resilience. Joy is a way of resisting despair. Community is a way of reclaiming strength. Music, dance, and feasting become expressions of hope and survival, proof that the spirit remains unbroken. So whether you find yourself in the thick of carnival chaos, dancing beside a bonfire at Festa Junina, or quietly placing flowers in the sea, know this. In Brazil, celebration is more than just tradition. It's a lifeline, a language, a heartbeat, and there's always room for one more voice in the song. If the heart of Brazil beats to the rhythm of samba and celebration, then its lungs breathe deep in the Amazon, where every exhale is a mist rising from 1,000 shades of green. Brazil is not only a country of people and cities, it is a country of creatures, of crawling roots and thunderous wings, of flowers that bloom in secret and jaguars that prowl by moonlight. Here, the natural world isn't a backdrop, it's a character. And what a dazzling, strange and enchanting character it is. Covering nearly half of South America, Brazil is a wonderland of biodiversity. It contains around 60% of the Amazon rainforest, often called the lungs of the planet, as well as other vital ecosystems like the Atlantic forest, the Cerrado savanna, the Pantanal wetlands, and the Caatinga scrublands. Each region pulses with life, uniquely adapted to its environment, yet all of it woven together in an invisible web of birdsong, rainfall, and photosynthesis. Let's start with the Amazon, a name that conjures images of towering trees, curling vines, and mist-shrouded rivers winding through endless jungle. This is the largest tropical rainforest on Earth, home to more species than anywhere else on the planet. Imagine walking through its understory and spotting a sloth hanging from a cecropia branch. Its fur greenish from algae, blinking slowly at nothing in particular. Somewhere above, a howler monkey calls out. Its voice so deep and eerie, you might think the forest itself is speaking. And it kind of is. The Amazon is home to over 400 billion individual trees. That's billion with a B. Among them are the Brazil nut tree, which towers over the canopy like a natural skyscraper, and a rubber tree, once the source of a booming industry that shaped the fate of entire cities. These trees are more than scenery. They are pharmacies, air filters, and storytellers, each one playing a role in the delicate balance of the biome. Then there's the wildlife. Brazil holds the record for the highest number of primate species anywhere in the world, with more than 140 types of monkeys. The golden lion tamarin, with its flame-coloured mane, is one of Brazil's most iconic creatures. Native to the Atlantic forest, it looks like a tiny sun with a tail, and thanks to conservation efforts, its population is slowly recovering from the brink of extinction. Birds, too, are everywhere. Toucans with their oversized neon bills, macaws in primary colours streaking through the trees, and the elusive harpy eagle, one of the most powerful raptors on Earth, with talons the size of a grizzly bear's claws. The sheer variety of birds in Brazil, over 1,800 species, makes it a dream for bird watchers, or really anyone with a neck capable of tilting upward. And let's not forget the Amazon River dolphin, or boto, which is not only pink, but also the subject of local legends. Some believe that at night, The dolphin turns into a handsome man, seduces women at riverside parties, and disappears before dawn. It may sound like folklore, but it's just another way the people of the Amazon blend their lives with the spirits of the river. Brazil's wildlife is not limited to the trees or the sky. It also crawls, slithers, and hops. Frogs here are not just green, they're electric blue, bright yellow, or nearly transparent. Some species are so small they can sit comfortably on a thumbnail. Others, like the horned frog, look like grumpy little toads wearing camouflage. Many of them are poisonous, using their colours as a warning to anyone thinking of making a snack out of them. Among the mammals, few inspire awe like the jaguar. The largest big cat in the Americas, the jaguar is a symbol of power and mystery. It stalks silently through forests and wetlands, its spotted coat dappled with light and shadow. Unlike most cats, jaguars love water. They're strong swimmers and can often be found lounging near rivers or hunting caimans with an eerie blend of stealth and ferocity. Seeing a jaguar in the wild is rare, but if you ever do, it's something you'll never forget. One of the best places to try your luck is the Pantanal, the world's largest tropical wetland. Unlike the dense foliage of the Amazon, the Pantanal is open and wide, making it easier to spot wildlife. It's a haven for jaguars, giant otters, marsh deer, and capybaras, the world's largest rodent and possibly the chillest animal on Earth. Capybaras live in groups, lounge by the water, and generally act like they're on a permanent vacation. They've been known to make friends with monkeys, birds, and even crocodiles, which seems like an odd choice until you realise capybaras are basically Zen masters in fur coats. If the Pantanal is the place to go for animals, then the Cerrado is the place for plants. This vast savanna covers more than 1/5 of Brazil and is considered one of the richest tropical savannas in the world. It's filled with strange, scrubby trees with twisted trunks and deep roots that survive fires and droughts. This is where you might spot the maned wolf, a creature that looks like a fox on stilts, and the giant anteater, whose long snout and luxurious tail make it look like it walked out of a fantasy novel. Speaking of fantasy, the Atlantic forest, or Mata Atlantica, is like the Amazon's more introverted cousin. It runs along the eastern coast of Brazil and once stretched over 1 million square kilometres, though today only fragments remain. Despite its reduced size, it is incredibly biodiverse, with many species found nowhere else on Earth. Wander its misty paths and you may encounter a muriqui, Brazil's largest monkey, known for its peaceful, social nature and fondness for hugs. But it's not just animals that make Brazil's natural world so rich. It's the plants. Brazil is home to more than 50,000 species of plants, many of which are used in traditional medicine, cuisine, and crafts. Orchids bloom in improbable shapes and colours. Bromeliads catch rainwater in their leafy cups. And the Victoria amazonica, a giant water lily with leaves big enough to support a small child, floats like green saucers on the still waters of the Amazon. Some plants are revered for their sacred or healing properties. The ayahuasca vine, used in traditional spiritual ceremonies by many indigenous groups, is both respected and mysterious. The guaraná plant, with its caffeine-rich seeds, has been used for centuries as a stimulant and is now found in energy drinks across Brazil. And then there's acai, the purple berry that's gone global, once harvested quietly in river communities, and now a global superfood phenomenon. Brazil's biodiversity is not just a point of pride, it's a precious, delicate inheritance. More than 20% of the world's known species are found within Brazil's borders. That includes about 1 out of every 10 known plant and animal species on the planet. But it's also under threat. Deforestation, illegal logging, mining, and expanding agriculture all take a toll, particularly in the Amazon. Efforts are underway to protect and preserve these ecosystems, led by a mix of government programs, international partnerships, and indigenous communities who have stewarded these lands for millennia. Indigenous knowledge plays a crucial role in conservation. Across Brazil, more than 300 indigenous groups live in diverse biomes, each with a unique relationship to the land. Their understanding of forest cycles, medicinal plants, and sustainable hunting practices is invaluable. In fact, studies have shown that indigenous managed territories are among the most effective at preserving biodiversity. The relationship between people and the land in Brazil isn't just scientific, it's spiritual. In Afro-Brazilian religions like Candomblé and Umbanda, natural places, rivers, forests, mountains, are inhabited by orixás, powerful spirits who connect humans to the divine. Yemanja, the sea goddess, rules the ocean. Oxóssi, the hunter, rules the forest. Offerings left in the jungle or cast into the sea are not just acts of faith. They are acknowledgements of nature's sacredness. This reverence for nature is also reflected in Brazil's national symbols. The flag features a green field representing forests, a yellow diamond for mineral wealth, and a blue globe with a white band that reads Ordem e Progresso, order and progress. But nature's glory isn't just found in symbolism, it's stitched into daily life. Many Brazilians grow up climbing trees, fishing in rivers, and recognizing the call of certain birds. Even in the busiest cities, green spaces like Rio's Tijuca National Park or Sao Paulo's Ibirapuera Park offer a daily reminder that nature is never far away. Urban gardens bloom on balconies. Monkeys swing through city trees. Butterflies flirt with bus stops. And then there's the rain. In the Amazon, it rains with theatrical intensity. Sheets of water falling as if the sky simply gave up holding back. The smell of petrichor, that earthy scent after rain, mixes with orchids and ripe fruit, and the whole forest seems to exhale. Rain doesn't interrupt life here, it composes it. Brazil's natural world is more than scenery. It is a living symphony of growth, colour, and adaptation. It's the hiss of a snake in the underbrush, the buzz of a hummingbird's wings, the soft tread of a tapir at dawn. It's a place where biodiversity isn't a statistic. It's an everyday miracle. To walk through Brazil's wild places is to be humbled, not just by the scale, but by the intimacy of nature. Every rustle, every call, every bloom has a purpose. And somehow, in the chaos of it all, there is harmony. A balance forged over millions of years, still holding, still breathing, still reminding us that the wild is not something to be tamed, but something to be honoured. Brazil's cities are like living tapestries, woven from shimmering skyscrapers, crumbling murals, centuries-old cathedrals, and neon-lit nightclubs. From Sao Paulo's restless energy to Brasilia's soaring concrete wings, from Salvador's colonial heart to Rio's dramatic mountains framing restless beaches. The urban landscape of Brazil is a dance between old and new, order and imagination. Here, every corner hums with possibility, and every street feels like a melody still being composed. Take São Paulo, for example. It is Brazil's beating heart of commerce, culture, and contrasts. A place where nearly 25 million people coexist in a web of neighbourhoods, avenues, and avenues of thought. One moment, you might stumble upon a soaring glass tower filled with global businesses. The next, you're in an arcade hidden behind an old mansion, sipping artisanal coffee while admiring a set of hand-painted murals. Street art isn't an occasional sight. It's a visual symphony with massive wall murals by artists like Eduardo Cobra and Ottavio Pandolfo, turning once grey facades into kaleidoscopic storytelling. São Paulo is also the city that never sleeps, not in the clichés of nightlife, but in its curiosity. Art galleries open late. Theatres stage experimental plays. Bookstores hold midnight readings. Sushi bars share sidewalks with feijoada joints, and rooftop bars watch over sprawling favelas. It's restless and creative, and the pace of life shifts like shifting choreography, never settling in one rhythm for too long. Now fly 300 miles northeast, and you'll hit Salvador, the vibrant, beating heart of Afro-Brazilian culture. Its narrow, winding streets in the Pelourinho district are a palette of sunset hues, an explosion of yellow, blue, and terracotta. Colonial balconies frame the streets. Musicians play capoeira in midday sun, and the scent of acarajé wafts from every corner. Churches from the 16th and 17th centuries share space with candomblé toreros, where drumming and dancing happen deep into the night. Here, modern shops rub shoulders with neighbourhood shrines, and every staircase feels like a story rehearsal. And then there's Brasilia, the city that almost feels like the future in mid-20th century. Designed from scratch in the 1950s, it resembles an enormous architectural scale model. A city shaped like an airplane with government buildings arrayed along its wings. Oscar Niemeyer's curves defy gravity. Blade-thin columns, floating roofs, sculptural domes. There's openness here, as if the city itself respects space and breath. It lacks the worn intimacy of older cities, but makes up for it with purposeful elegance and a sense of national aspiration. Brasilia is less an urban organism than a grand declaration of what modern Brazil could be. Contrast that modernist vision with the coastal elegance of Rio de Janeiro, where city and landscape merge in a kind of spontaneous harmony. Mountains rise steeply from the beach, and condominiums cling to dizzying heights. The Christ the Redeemer statue keeps quiet watch over the chaos below. Cariocas, Rio's inhabitants, breathe in ocean air and samba rhythms, moving between the pastel colonial buildings of Santa Teresa and the sleek high-rises of Botafogo. Coffee is sipped at street-side cafes, surfers paddle out behind Sugarloaf Mountain at dawn, and carnival floats are conceived year-round in neighbourhood workshops. Beyond life's giants, Brazilian cities vary wildly, just like the land itself. Belo Horizonte is urbanism deliberately planned around mountains and plazas. Recife is split between golden beaches, urban canals, and a fort still standing guard. Curitiba is famous for its pioneering urban gardens, bike-friendly design, and integrated bus networks. Porto Alegre in the south feels more European, with tree-lined streets and a cafe culture reminiscent of Portugal. Together, these cities tell the story of Brazil's regional diversity, but also its shared energy. The eagerness to imagine, to build, to gather. And what about the people who live in these cities? They're architects and painters, vendors and musicians, skateboarders and samba banders. You'll find families cooking street food dinners on pavement grates, students playing jazz in underground bars, retirees dancing country forró in parks, protesters marching in the streets, business meetings that stretch into sunset, oral history narrators sharing tales of resistance during the dictatorship, tech startups emerging in refurbished warehouses, spiritual healers welcoming those seeking balance. It's a cross-section of Brazil's many voices flowing together in real time. Perhaps no feature defines Brazil's modern cities more than their ability to reinvent. Factories become art studios. Favelas become cultural hubs. Sidewalks become stages. Malls become book fairs. That warp and weft quality of transitions, overlaps, collisions is what brings texture to Brazilian urban life. Take São Paulo's Avenida Paulista, a 6-lane boulevard that blows by at highway speed, and you'll still find peaceful Sunday mornings when the avenue closes to cars. Cyclists, joggers, families, and musicians take over with a calm, spontaneous festival feel. The city takes back its space and reshapes it on a moment's notice. In Rio's favelas, many homes look like improvised sculptures, built bit by bit, painted boldly, stacked defiantly up steep hills. They form neighbourhoods that are rugged yet radiant, vulnerable yet vibrantly alive. Some favelas now host community cinemas, samba schools, and football pitches that let talent emerge and pride flourish. These are places of informal architecture, yes, but also of informal systems of care, culture, and creativity. The digital age is rewriting Brazil's urban narrative too. Cities like São Paulo and Recife are becoming hubs for innovation, with tech accelerators, co-working spaces, and street-smart entrepreneurs building apps that connect communities, improve public transit, and amplify cultural exchange. At the same time, museums and universities open their doors to social projects, bringing technology, art, and activism into conversation. Public spaces in Brazilian cities invite participation. You might see street art workshops offered in parks. You might find midnight drum circles by subway stations. You might join a group that reads poetry out loud on city steps. You might meet a volunteer planting trees or cleaning a river. City life blends consumption with creation, noise with nuance, planning with improvisation. Yet these cities also wrestle with challenges: inequality, pollution, housing shortages, crime. In many urban areas, skyscrapers stand next to favelas. Infrastructure struggles to meet demand. Public safety remains patchy, but Brazil's cities also display resilience, born from years of grappling with complexity. Neighbourhood organisations lobby for transit, arts collectives reclaim abandoned lots, favela councils lobby for sanitation systems, and university researchers collaborate with residents to envision solar-powered roofs or flood-resilient homes. One of the remarkable things about urban Brazil is the sense that participation matters. People hold block parties to decide local issues. They run cultural festivals themselves. They paint walls to tell stories. They take to the streets when they feel democracy is slipping. In Brazil's cities, citizenship often feels like a neighbourhood-level art project, a patchwork quilt sewed by regular people who refuse to wait for someone else to make change. This energy shows up in everyday interactions too. In grocery stores, a cashier might welcome you with genuine interest. On buses, conversations flow easily. In local bars, strangers become companions over glasses of beer and plates of bolinho de bacalhau. People stop to help, give directions, shine shoes, pass out pamphlets, preach gospel, sell books. City life in Brazil is communal. It's about shared air and shared opportunity and shared imagination. Architecture reveals something else, a belief that cities should feel good to be in. That's why many Brazilian city designs include parks, public libraries, outdoor cafes, art promenades, concert venues, botanical gardens, and beachside promenades. Even in the densest metropolis, there's a soft edge, a place to sit, to look up, to breathe, and yes, to dream. Brazil's modern tapestry stretches from the pride of Brasilia's planned horizons to Sao Paulo's restless energy, from Salvador's vibrant heritage to Rio's stunning contradictions. It's a portrait of a nation rebuilding itself every day, a nation that spans rainbow populations, rainforests, and skyscrapers, and yet insists on weaving them all into places that overflow with colour, sound, and possibility. Because in Brazil, cities aren't finished. They're works in progress. Songs you haven't learned yet, stories waiting to be told, dances that haven't found their final step. And if you listen closely, you can hear in their walls and their skies the footsteps of those moving things forward. Bold, curious, and beautifully human. Brazil is not just a country. It's a kaleidoscope of landscapes, languages, and local cultures, each region shining with its own palette, accent, and pace. From the red dust of the Sertão to the mist-covered peaks of the south, from the lush depths of the Amazon to the cosmopolitan highways of São Paulo, Brazil wears many faces, and each one invites discovery. Let's take a slow, wandering journey through these regional stories, mapping more than just geography, a map of identity and belonging. In Brazil's north, the land is woven with rivers, deep, wide veins carrying life through the Amazon rainforest. Here, the forest isn't a postcard, it's a classroom. Children learn about camu-camu berries at 5 years old, and elders use lantern light to identify constellations by their indigenous names. The language of this region is more water than words, and the culture is shaped around piranha fishing, canoe festivals, and the scent of tucupi simmering in clay pots. River communities still celebrate tradition. The Festival de Parintins, for example, isn't just a performance, it's a story. Two teams, Garantido and Caprichoso, compete in a 4-day extravaganza that retells indigenous myths with dance, colour, and knockout vocal harmony. The rain may fall, but the crowds are resolute, painted, chanting, and carried on their fluvial pride. Life here is measured not in miles but in hours by river. A classroom might be reached by boat. Crops planted along floodplains are harvested when fish have floated into the fields. Rainfall is a song as familiar as samba. The sky opens and the forest hushes before it exhales. Indigenous cultures also remain strong in this region. Groups like the Yanomami, Kayapo, Ticuna, and Munduruku still hold territory, pass down ancestral languages, and guard knowledge of forest medicines. These communities face challenges: land rights, illegal mining, drought, but their living lifeways offer hope. They remind Brazil and the world that there are ways of drawing breath that aren't urban or industrial, but deeply human and timeless. Head east and you'll emerge in a region that is both earth-worn and exuberant, the northeast. The Sertão, Brazil's arid backland, is a place of red soil, brittle patches of earth, and sky so vast it feels infinite. Here the Caatinga thicket cracks in drought, and the sun can seem relentless. But this is no barren wasteland. It's the landscape that gave rise to Cordel literature, little booklets of popular verse, often tacked onto strings in marketplaces. It's where poets wrote of drought, of wanderers on dusty roads, of jagunsos, outlaw heroes, riding under blazing sun. It's where the lampion of folklore, cowboy outlaws, walked beneath a fiery sky and became immortal songs. Then there's Capito Cangaso, Maria Bonita, the heroes and bandits of Sartanejo myth, figures bound up with struggle, resilience, and moral ambiguity. They haunt the imagination of every schoolchild, their legends told over evening fires. But move closer to the coast, and the tone changes. As cities like Recife, Olinda, and Salvador blaze with colour. Colonial mansions lean into narrow streets. Beach music floats from bars. In Salvador, you hear 4/4 rhythms pulsing from candomblé terreiros, and the smell of dende oil wafts from kitchen windows. Fish markets bustle in Maceió, and João Pessoa, fresh catches spilling over palm leaves. Food in the northeast is Afro-Indigenous fusion. Acarajé, moqueca, macaxeira frita, each bite telling centuries of migration, adaptation, and joy. And during Carnival, forró melodies drift out of arrayas. Folk dances weave into daily life. Craft people carve filhos, make lace from coconut fibre, bead fetus do Senhor do Bonfim. It is a rhythm balmy as the sea, fierce as the sun. In the vast grassy plains of the central west, the Cerrado spreads its woody savanna across the landscape. Grasses sway in the wind, termite mounds rise like sculpted earth, and the horizon is vast. This region, where Brasilia lies amid scrubland, speaks of openness and ambition, just as its modernist capital speaks of a country's leap into future. Brasilia herself is a vision, symmetrical, gridlocked in modernist lines, and quiet at dawn. Designed by Lucio Costa and Oscar Niemeyer, it was built in just a few years in the late 1950s. The city is a living artwork, arm-shaped residential blocks, massive civic plazas, soaring cathedral spires, and a sense that architecture can be sculpted like music. Move south, and the landscape transforms into the Pantanal, the world's largest tropical wetland. During the dry season, pools of water shrink, exposing vast plains dotted with caiman and capybara, their presence punctuated by bird calls. During the rainy season, rivers flood, creating a floating world of lilies and orchids. The Pantanal is wildlife Americana. Giant anteaters, scarlet ibises, jaguars prowling at twilight. Nature is visible here, unfolded, not hidden. Life around Pantanal tends to the rhythm of water. Ranches raise cattle along seasonal floodlines. Tours launch at dawn. Fishermen cast nets against swooping toucans. The Pantaneiro culture, centered around horsemanship, cattle and open skies, is a rural counterpoint to Brasilia's concrete harmony. The southeast is Brazil's economic engine. São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Minas Gerais, Espírito Santo. It's home to more people, more industry, more art, and more contradictions. Skyscrapers cast shadows over slums. Runway fashion stands cheek by jowl with handmade crafts. Mercadorias, high and low, meet at street markets filled with spices, cafezinho, street art, and samba. São Paulo offers the nerve-clacking pace of global commerce. Closed-door boardroom deals harmonise with graffiti-fuelled expressions. Itaú skyscrapers reflected in mirrored tower blocks, while in Bixiga, traditional pizza shops hold court. Paulista Avenue becomes pedestrian on Sundays, filled with cyclists and dancing. Chinatown, Liberidade, Jardins, all of it urbanity woven tight. But just 2 hours away, Minas Gerais offers a contrast. Colonial towns frozen in gilded Baroque, Ouro Preto, Tiradentes, Mariana, granite hills, cobbled streets, churches dripping with gold leaf, carved by conceited but crippled architects. Here life moves slower. People drink cachaça, sit on porches, scroll through their trombonista decades. Perhaps nothing sums up Minas like its food. Pão de queijo, feijão tropeiro, frango com quiabo, and doce de leite. These tastes are honeyed, comforting, complicated, and enduring. It's a taste of place, of kitchen memories and farm tables, slow-cooked love. Then comes Rio, where city and mountain meet the sea. Bright beaches cradle forested mountains. Samba spills from bars. Carnival floats are crafted half a year before the event. Trams climb historic hills. Suburbs hide steel drum echoes. Beaches hide surf breaks. And in every alley, the curving sun, the sugarloaf, and Christ stand guard, uniting rock, water, steel, and humanity. Down south, the air grows cooler and the flavours shift. You'll pass through curving coastlines, pine forests, and vineyards. Cities like Curitiba lead the charge in urban design. Park-lined boulevards, bus rapid transit systems, botanical gardens. And then you reach Rio Grande do Sul, the land of gauchos. Wide brim hats, bombacha trousers, horse lords, barbecue legends. Here, mate tea, or chimarrão, is passed from hand to hand with ritual courtesy. Barbecue isn't a weekend. It's a philosophy. Thick steaks roasted on open flames for hours, seasoned only with rock salt. Social circles bloom around the Carrasco, where wine glasses don't clink. They caress. This region has strong European heritage. German and Italian immigrants have shaped both food and architecture. Wine is grown in Bento Gonçalves. Pasta and polenta sit on restaurant tables beside grilled meats. German villages hold Oktoberfest, the world's second largest after Munich. It feels like Europe in Latin America, but with a dash of tropical brazenness. In Santa Catarina, the blend continues. Beaches meet Alps. You'll find surfing beside tea plantations. Festas secure decades old. Dialects shift. Fog may roll in by afternoon. Festivals like Oktoberfest in Blumenau pulse to German Oompa bands and Brazilian forró. It's an invitation to dance two traditions at once, socks over sandals, your heart caught between the samba beat and the accordion waltz. These regions, Amazon, Northeast Sertão, Central West, Southeast, South, aren't just landscapes. They are lifeways. They are accents. They are flavours. Someone born in Bahia's coast will swim differently than someone who grew up riding horses in the Pampa. Someone raised between curbs of São Paulo will challenge a Brasilia commuter at brunch to explain which is less pedestrian. Yet these regions aren't silos. They are threads in a national quilt. The São Paulo cafe might serve açaí smoothie. The Porto Alegre churrascaria may add farofa to the meat. The Amazonian teacher might air bossa nova in the classroom. The curate in Ouro Preto might light a candle for Iemanjá on New Year's as much as Our Lady of Aparecida. That's the charm of Brazilian regionalism. Each part is distinct, and each is open to being reinterpreted, remixed, and reloved by all. Travellers sense it. You walk through a few states, and it feels like returning home, strangely familiar but always surprising. Brazilians sense it. They oscillate between local pride and national belonging, crafting identities as layered as the country's landscapes. One woman from Pará schooling in Rio, might chant in her mother tongue, dance frevo on weekends, and sip mate under a pine tree. One man from Paraná, working in Sao Paulo, might dance samba in his soul and roast a churrasco with his city friends. One teenager from Pernambuco, raised in Belém, might hear traces of sertanejo in their rap beats and fill their online playlist with funk karaoke. Brazilian regional identity isn't a barrier, it's a creative launchpad. It's a license to carry more than one past, to let tradition coexist with curiosity. It's a national comfort with multiplicity. To be a Brazilian is to be a congregation of regions, not a single thing. So next time you close your eyes and imagine Brazil, don't picture only beaches or only rainforest or only modernist architecture. Picture a mosaic, red dust, city lights, river whispers, mountain peaks. Picture people speaking in varied accents, weaving foods into friendship, creating festivals that feel like different seasons. Each region tells you, this is who I am. And together they say, here is Brazil, vast, vibrant, and alive in every direction you look. And if your heart feels too full, it might just be this country doing what it does best. Making space for every voice, every flavour, every landscape to speak. In Brazil, the past and the future often walk side by side, like dance partners moving fluidly across a crowded floor. History is not left behind. It hums beneath every street mural and echoes through gatherings where protest and music intertwine. At the same time, innovations are sprouting, from classrooms to startups, pushing the country forward into a new era of hope and renewal. This is a land grappling with legacies, yet striving to imagine what comes next. It is a conversation between memory and possibility, pain and creativity. Brazil's museums and memorials are more than repositories of objects. They are living archives where history speaks and sometimes shouts. In Sao Paulo, the Sao Paulo Museum of Art, MASP, sits perched on red concrete stilts, its minimalist lines framing the city's pulse. Inside are masterpieces from European and Brazilian artists, an invitation to reflect on Brazil's place in global narratives and how national identity was shaped by colonial influence and modernist vision. In Rio, the Museu de Amanhã, the Museum of Tomorrow, takes that reflection further, with futuristic architecture and interactive exhibits that examine challenges like climate change, inequality, and global migration. It invites visitors not just to remember the past, but to imagine and even build the future. It's a reminder that culture can be a compass, not just a clock. But Brazil's cultural reflections are not contained solely within grand spaces. Street art often grapples directly with history. In the favelas of Rio and the working class neighbourhoods of Sao Paulo, colourful murals depict indigenous activists, Yoruba deities, anonymous heroes, and forgotten moments in the struggle for democracy. Walking those alleys, you sense that memory is alive, that walls bear witness, that art can be protest and tribute. That witness is especially significant when it comes to Brazil's darker chapters, especially the dictatorship era from 1964 to 1985. These were years of censorship, forced disappearances and political repression. Yet they were also years of quiet resistance. Musicians performed coded lyrics, writers circulated clandestine poems, filmmakers used metaphor to critique authoritarianism. After the transition to democracy, Brazil faced the daunting task of remembering without sinking into grief. Memorials to the missing now stand in public plazas. Former secret prisons, like the DOPS building in São Paulo, now host cultural centres. The idea is to hold fast to memory, not to punish nostalgia, but to prevent repetition. Young Brazilians learn of this history in schools and public discussions, so that democracy remains alive, not abstract. The question of historical justice extends to Brazil's indigenous and Afro-Brazilian populations. For much of history, their stories were erased, their contributions minimised. But today, Brazil is awakening. Indigenous organisations are reclaiming ancestral territories and reviving languages. Digital archives showcase oral histories from Amazonian elders. Cities recognise traditional medicine and land stewardship as invaluable. Indigenous artists are gaining global attention, their work speaking of resilience, spirituality, and interconnection. Similarly, Afro-Brazilian movements have grown in visibility and political muscle. Land rights activists, religious leaders, and community organisers challenge structures built on inherited inequality. Quilombola communities, descendants of escaped enslaved people, fight for recognition of their lands and traditions. Their music, foodways, and spiritual practices are no longer marginalised. They are national treasures. Schools and universities are now grappling with Brazil's legacy of slavery and colonisation. Textbooks once glossed these chapters. Today, educators include voices of the oppressed. University programs study reparations, racial equity, and reinterpret public symbols. Statues celebrate poets, activists, and spiritual leaders who were previously ignored. The tide has begun to turn toward a more inclusive cultural narrative. And yet, progress isn't linear. Brazil faces harsh realities: economic instability, corruption, climate threats, and persistent inequality. Indigenous lands are still invaded. Forests continue to shrink. Favelas still lack infrastructure. Democracy remains fragile in the face of polarization. The promise of progress is a daily challenge, not a foregone conclusion. Yet amid complexity, creativity thrives. Young architects retrofit favelas with solar panels and staircases. Educators design community schools where African history is core. Artists mix traditional candomblé patterns with cutting-edge design. Tech entrepreneurs build apps that connect remote Amazonian teachers with urban mentors. Music producers sample indigenous chants alongside electronic beats. Cuisine blends ancestral cooking with modern techniques. These are experiments in cultural reckoning, blending memory, innovation, and change. Take the city of Salvador. Its Cidade Baixa neighbourhood, once overlooked, now buzzes with cultural centres, book fairs, and art residencies that celebrate Afro-Brazilian heritage. Entrepreneurs create design objects, weaving colonial ceramics with African symbols. Chefs honour ancestral ingredients like donde, cocoa, and okra in elevated cuisine. Festivals centre on Afro-Brazilian narratives. It's a place where the future emerges from a reclaimed past. Elsewhere, Quilombola cooperatives in Maranhão and Bahia sell cacao and craft internationally on ethical platforms. Indigenous-led ecotourism in the Amazon brings economic opportunity without clearing forests. Brasilia's innovative urban planning becomes a lab for green transport and digital democracy. Curitiba's bus system inspires cities worldwide. Rio's community radio DJs now mix local news with youth-produced podcasts, turning memory into dialogue. Even in the world of football, conversations are changing. Black players who once sang only for crowds now speak on race, wages, and identity. Girls' youth leagues receive attention. Stadium murals recall Ida Berenstein, Leia, Formiga. Brazilian women players who chose sport despite barriers. Pelé's museum displays his indigenous heritage as much as his athletic feats. Football becomes a space for reflection as well as celebration. In literature, young Afro-Indigenous writers publish novels that weave ancestral lore with futuristic visions. Graphic novels and podcasts tell stories of quilombos, sertões, and quilombola saints. Festivals showcase marginalised voices, translating their work globally. University corridors echo with oral histories and performance pieces that confront colonisation and its aftermath. Importantly, Brazil continues to grow in global cultural exchange, not by imitation, but by invitation. Brazilian architects design libraries in Angola. Chefs open Amazon-themed restaurants in Tokyo. Musicians collaborate with Japanese jazz bands and Congolese choirs. Scholars write about Brazil in Nordic languages. Indigenous Brazilian rappers collaborate with Palestinian youth. The country becomes a dance floor of innovation, remembering while remixing, preserving while propelling forward. Yes, the past bears weight. It reminds Brazil of stolen land, silenced voices, and ecological harm. But the past also teaches. It teaches resourcefulness. How Quilombo communities grow manioc in floodgates. How indigenous people steward trees without chainsaws. How Afro-Brazilians resist by singing. It teaches that memory and imagination can coexist. That honouring the dead doesn't mean disinviting the living. That responsibility can be fertile ground for renewal. And Brazil knows how to dream. When children sing songs of Candile, when next generation capoeira circles emerge under LED lights, when city murals depict black indigenous apostles, when Amazonian scientists map plant compounds for medicines, you see a creative tension at play, honouring roots while reaching for stars. In classrooms, teachers ask, who gets to define Brazil's story? In boardrooms, designers ask, how can identity shape innovation? In forests, stewards ask, how do we protect the future without forgetting ancestors? Across the country, Brazilian hearts beat to the rhythm of renewal, inviting participation, unearthing memory, shaping tomorrow. So Brazil's cultural future is not an echo of what came before. It is a dialogue. A conversation about land, history, identity and possibilities. It's messy, hopeful, defiant, curious. It asks questions more often than it offers answers. And in that open-endedness lies its beauty, because in a country built on so many foundations, indigenous wisdom, African resilience, European aspiration, immigrant creativity, it is fitting that its culture refuses to settle. It demands engagement. It assents that change can be inherited. And it reminds the world. History isn't a burden when you carry it with curiosity and courage. Unlike a weight that drags, it can be the very wind that lifts. That's the Brazil of tomorrow. A place rooted in memory, energized by imagination, and alive in the space between what was and what could be. As the warm Brazilian night settles around us, let's take one last journey through the sounds, scents, and stories of this vast land. Close your eyes and imagine the gentle pulse of ocean waves on a moonlit beach, the distant hum of a samba beat drifting through palm leaves. Picture the sturdiness of ancient mountains, the hush of endless forests, and the laughter of families lingering over coffee in the kitchen at dawn. Brazil, so many contrasts, yet woven together by a single thread. the enduring spirit of connection. Brazil's landscapes are more than geography, they are companions on the journey. From the first moment you felt the sparkle of ocean mist on your skin, to the hush of an Amazonian canopy dripping emerald light, you've been held by the land. It shapes rhythms. The swell of the waves inspires samba. The canopy's hush holds space for reflection. The Sertão's red dust gives rise to poetry. The fat tendrils of fog on Curitiba's streets whisper of quiet reflection. The land doesn't just exist around you, it lives with you, inviting you to breathe slowly, deeply, until your heartbeat hums with the same melody. And the people, the true heart of Brazil, carry these lands within them. We've met families pulling steaming feijoada into the centre of a table, children leaping barefoot through puddles after rain, elders passing stories that feel like rivers. You've heard the voices of musicians spinning worlds from strings and drums, felt the rhythm of dancers who speak without words, seen artists transform rough walls into canvases of hope and memory. Brazilians don't just live in their country, they embody it, breathing life into its wild beauty and deep complexity with every sneeze of laughter or sigh of sorrow. Remember the taste of pão de queijo warm from the oven? The bite of sweetness in a brigadeiro dipped into coffee at dusk? The tang of lime in a caipirinha? The flavour of smoke and salt from a churrasco grill? Food, in Brazil, is a conversation. A symphony of past and present, blending indigenous crops, African spice, and European technique. With every mouthful, you taste centuries, and perhaps understand why sharing a meal here isn't just nourishment, it's devotion. We've walked through faith and ritual, from the hush of a candlelit procession to the drumming gatherings of candomblé, from indigenous stories whispered by night to modern congregations dreaming of tomorrow. Brazil's spirituality doesn't tell you what to believe. It invites you to feel, to find meaning in a midsummer festival, to sense holiness in a mountain silhouette, to look into a child's eyes and know there is something bigger than yourself. Faith here is not a doctrine, it is an opening, a space where grief and celebration curl into dance. We've embraced movement, not just physical motion, but the flow of life itself. Brazil reminded us that to move can be prayer, protest, or play. Through football pitches and Ronaldo's artistry, through capoeira circles swirling like water over stone, through beach volleyball laughter and foro spins under glowing lanterns. You felt what it means to be alive, fully present, fully engaged, fully human. Along the way, we encountered festivals that feel like coiled heartbeats bursting free. From Carnival's riotous burst of colour to Festa Junina's bonfires flickering in rural squares. From Catholic pilgrimages to Yolanda processions by the sea. Each celebration grounds us in community, bursts our private selves open, and reminds us that to live fully is also to feel together. Brazil's cultural identity isn't a single note, it's a chord. Indigenous voices echo with ancestral songs. Afro-Brazilian rhythms hum with resistance and resilience. European architecture shapes plazas where futures are imagined. Immigrants have brought sous shops and char, mangueira wood carvings and fat pizzas. Today's youth remix all of it into bold new beats and bright murals. To know Brazil is to recognise that every layer is essential, and that each whisper and shout matters. We've seen history wrap its arms around the present, from colonial churches gilded in Baroque ornament to Brasilia's shiny futurism. We've held in mind the brutal weight of slavery and dictatorship, and the flickering flame of hope sparked by resistance music, street art, and education. We've witnessed efforts to reconcile, remember, and build a more equitable tomorrow, from indigenous land stewardship to Afro-Brazilian activism, from ecological innovation to cultural fusion. Brazil's past is not buried. It is alive in murals, archives, museum walls, and city squares. It hums beneath the feet of children learning songs their great-grandparents once sang. And we glimpse the future, emerging technologies blossoming in favela innovation hubs. Environmental voices rising from the Amazon, weaving ancient knowledge into planetary policy. Food movements letting chefs raise awareness through aroma and flavour. Women's football leagues scoring visibility and changing norms. Startups led by Indigenous youth offering new ways to measure progress. This is not a distant dream. It is street-side entrepreneurship, community radio, app building in co-working spaces squeezed between mango trees. It is music streamed across continents, merging beat tapes and bird calls, noticing worlds within webs and networks. All of this has unfolded slowly, intimately, through late-night reflections, through images flickering across balconies in São Paulo or lantern-lit red earth of the Caatinga, through the shafts of sunlight in Foro Festas or ocean glint during a Thanksgiving sunrise on Copacabana, through the smell of wet manioc leaves and the taste of lime salt sprayed on your tongue by off-duty fishermen, through the feel of a stranger's rhythm finding yours in the dance of a capoeira roda. Brazil has invited you to travel gently, into forests and stadiums, kitchens and classrooms, protests and Santeria altars, always with curiosity and humility. You've wandered its back streets and beaches, looked up at the Christ statue, and down at the roots of a rubber tree. You've listened to sunrise silence, sunset laughter, midnight birds, and the low hum of an ocean shore. There's an echo in your bones now, one shaped by countless voices, each saying, you are part of this too. It doesn't matter whether you've been here once or hold it in your heart from afar. Brazil's invitation is open. Feel the green, taste the sweet and spicy. Move your body with curiosity. Remember that every life and story matters. Expect tomorrow to come faster than expected and smell of blooms and rebellion. Carry its rhythms within so they rise again in your dreams, as gentle nudges and adventurous impulses. As Brazil drifts toward twilight, there's a moment when the day's heat releases, and a gentle breeze slips through palm fronds and apartment balconies. In this quiet time, neither day nor night, the country seems to pause and listen. It's a moment of transition and reflection, the perfect time to consider how far Brazil has come and where it might be headed next. Brazil's present is shaped by its past, and as we've walked through its landscapes, traditions and stories, we've witnessed a nation both rooted and restless. There are footprints from the Tupi and Guarani peoples along riverbanks, echoing through ancestral song and language. There are imprints of Portuguese explorers, seen in colonial gold-leaf churches and Baroque cathedrals. There are the lasting imprints of African spirituality, rhythms, and survival creativity, woven into candomblé ceremonies, samba drumming, and capoeira's dance-fight fluidity. There are layers and layers of migration. Italians, Japanese, Germans, Syrians, and more, each weaving their own thread into a national tapestry. All of these voices, and countless unnamed voices, compose the backdrop against which Brazil now dreams its future. Today's dreams are ambitious. They reach for greater social justice, environmental sustainability, technological innovation, cultural inclusivity, and national unity. They ask questions like, can Brazil protect its forests, and by doing so, protect the world? Can it confront racial and economic inequality, not only through policy, but through cultural awareness and reparative justice? Can Brazil honour its indigenous guardians, rural communities, and quilombola traditions by giving them political voice and land security? Young Brazilians are asking these questions and acting on them. Students in university town halls organise climate marches inspired by Amazon leaders. Artists work with quilombola communities to preserve oral histories and create ceramics that tell stories of empowerment. Startup founders connect remote villages to digital health platforms so that mothers and elders in the Amazon can consult with doctors via smartphone camera. Folk musicians mix rap and cordel poetry to expose corruption. Activists stage protests across cities, carrying banners in Tupi languages. People are not waiting for someone else. They are building. Brazil's present is also defined by its ecosystems. 1 out of every 10 of the planet's known species grows here. Its waterways move more water than the Amazon to a single river basin. Its wetlands supple 1/3 of all freshwater flows on Earth. Yet deforestation, illegal mining, and land grabs still threaten these natural treasures. Left unchecked, Brazil risks losing biodiversity, stability, and the natural resources that hold the whole country and the rest of the planet together. The winds of change are travelling with indigenous knowledge systems, wisdom about fire-resistant crops, cyclical planting, ecosystem restoration, and the spiritual bond between people and place. Brazil's future depends on whether those systems are protected, nurtured, and given a seat at national tables. Already, documentary filmmakers, scientists, and youth represent indigenous views in the halls of government and international negotiation. It's a hopeful step to evolve from a model that saw land as commodities to a vision that sees land as kin. Urban life shares in this transformation. Mega cities like São Paulo and Rio still wrestle with traffic and social inequality, but communities are redesigning streets for people. Bike lanes, street fairs, community gardens, local solar networks. Residents in favelas retrofit homes with energy-efficient solutions. Public transit planners draft corridors that connect instead of segregate. Civic tech-bound volunteers open up municipal budgets so citizens understand, ask questions, and co-create solutions. São Paulo's cultural circuits pulse with neighbourhood poetry nights, art in alleyways, and interactive workshops. Brasilia's recent green infrastructure projects integrate stormwater gardens and native plantings. Brazil's cities are not only surviving, they are becoming laboratories of possibility. Brazil's cultural future is also deeply creative. Artists, indigenous, Afro-descendant, immigrant, and cross-regional, are redefining Brazilian identity by fusing ancestral forms with new media. They paint murals that reimagine colonial landmarks as living ancestral beings. They release albums in Tupi karaoke apps. They broadcast podcasts from Quilombo rooftops. They program VR film experiences about Amazon legends. They swirl capoeira, skateboarding, and digital art into new forms of storytelling. These efforts are not about turning away from culture, but about embracing it fully. inviting everyone to participate. Education is a cornerstone of Brazil's future. Literacy is rising, curricula are diversifying, and schools are beginning to install permaculture gardens, teach climate justice, and recover Afro-Indigenous histories. Public universities are incubators of community businesses, from organic farms to solar hubs, from cooperative crafts to digital apps that tackle local problems. Children in the Sertão plant trees. Students in Porto Alegre design community energy grids. The next generation is learning that education is not only about passing exams, it's about nurturing caretakers, creators, and critical thinkers. The Brazilian economy is also undergoing a transformation. Farmers are diversifying to agroforestry systems. Coffee producers seek shade-grown, and not just for sale at markets, but for biodiversity and soil health. Solar power projects bloom across the northeast's sun-kissed plains. Tech hubs in Recife, AgTech Valley, connect farmers to data-driven solutions. Brazil's existing global industries, aviation, aerospace, agriculture, are increasingly merging advanced research with sustainability. Universities partner with local communities to develop inventions that flatten inequalities rather than expand them. Yet all of this potential exists alongside significant challenges: political instability, deeply rooted inequality, shrinking ecosystems, a pandemic's economic shadow, violent crime in urban areas, drought in the Sertão, and uncertain global commodity prices. Brazil's present and near future is a path that demands balancing on a thin line between hope and setback. It requires collective courage, institutional integrity, and a wide embrace of cultural wisdom. One striking feature of Brazil right now is its willingness to talk loudly, often publicly, about these issues. Old taboos are slipping. Television news features quilombola and indigenous voices. University podcasts host Afro-Brazilian philosophers. Street theatre interrupts traffic to demand water justice. Streetwear brands print t-shirts in Tupi. Local governments open their environmental data. The country hums with debate, dissent, and dialogue. The contrast between the pressure points of the present and the possibility of a richer future could not be more vibrant. Above all, Brazil's real potential lies in nurturing what scholar Boaventura de Sousa Santos calls plural cosmologies, the idea that multiple ways of knowing and being can live together. Indigenous ecological wisdom alongside scientific innovation, Afro-Brazilian spiritual resilience alongside global pop expression, urban design alongside savanna stewardship, family recipes alongside molecular gastronomy, football and forró alongside capoeira and skateboarding, sacred rituals alongside political marches. It's a future built on respectful conversation, not erasure, on cultural co-creation, not domination. Right now, Brazil stands at a crossroads. Its forests tremble, its skies shift, its cities hum with negotiations. Every action, whether a protest, a policy proposal, a seed planted, a school opened, a land defended, is a step in the direction of what kind of country it chooses to become. Tomorrow might hold a Brazil that is greener, fairer, and more culturally radiant than ever before. But it will take commitment from policymakers who honour treaties, from communities who share their knowledge, from artists who reimagine the narrative, from educators who teach critical empathy, and even from tourists who choose to listen before photographing. As the breeze carries the scent of night jasmine through Rio's streets, or the hush of the forest seeps into Amazonian riverside cabins, You feel the pulse of possibility. You sense that Brazil's next chapter is not written yet, but it is being woven now by every footstep, song, speech, and handshake. In that weaving lies the promise of emergence, and perhaps a model for the world, that through courage, conversation, and creativity, a nation can rise into its next dream without forgetting its roots. Brazil is dreaming again, and it invites us all to lean in, listen, and add our thread to the tapestry. As Brazil's skies settle into the golden hour, reflecting on everything we have journeyed through, one idea gently takes shape in the mind. Brazil is not a static place. It's a living story, unfolding with every breath, every heartbeat, every shared meal and dance. It's a place where people, land, spirit, creativity, and hope entwine. This is a live wire of possibility, a place you leave with question marks in your pocket and quiet songs thrumming softly in your soul. Think back to the laughter echoing across a favela during a samba rehearsal, the hush of a candlelit procession, the rustle of orchids in the Amazon dawn. That laughter, that light, it follows you beyond your visit. It becomes a kind of pulse, a reminder that culture isn't something you listen to once and archive. It's something that finds a rhythm in your own life, if you let it. Brazil, vast, layered, and alive, is a country that reflects our shared human contradictions. Joy and grief, abundance and loss, tradition and innovation. But unlike a puzzle that's already completed, Brazil remains a mosaic still being assembled, a combination of many faces, voices, dreams, and deep roots. You can trace the contours of that mosaic in the smiles of children scooping up ocean water at dawn, in the mouths of elders recounting legends around tiled tables, in the steady hum of public transit, in murals that redraw Maya and Angola into city streets. This ceremonial combination of old and new, city and forest, home and horizon, is not just Brazil's beauty. It is its invitation. It's a call to ask, how might the world look if we treated our stories like forests to protect, not fences to build? What might community mean if we listened before closing our mouths? What if education were more than just knowledge, but kinship, with land, with ancestors, with possibility? Brazil's past of colonization, enslavement, migration, inequality is not behind it. It's in the stones of colonial churches, in the taste of coffee mixed with cassava, in the cordel still hanging on string in rural markets. But it is also in the songs urging freedom, in capoeira lines that formed as hidden resistance, in quilombos that became villages of defiance. Brazil's stories have scars, yes, but these scars shine like gold seams in the earth, buried by the cruelty of injustice, reclaimed through collective remembering. And Brazil's future is not inevitable. It is being born right now, in the minds of students planting trees while memorizing math, in indigenous journalists reporting on forest fires, in Afro-Brazilian dancers who teach their steps to curious strangers, in favelas installing solar panels, in chefs blending mango and millet, in tech hubs doing translation work for Tupi language children, in neighbours rediscovering forgotten agricultural methods. The future is active, not passive. Yes, there are challenges, political divisions, environmental threats, persistent disparities. But there is also resolve, rooted in ancestral wisdom, steeled by modern invention, and carried forward by everyone who wakes up, worried and hopeful, and decides to act. That tension between damage and regeneration, between memory and vision, seems to be Brazil's true north. The tipping point, whether sorrow wins or creativity wins, depends on the voices we choose to amplify, the relationships we choose to honour, the rhythms we choose to follow. Perhaps the most surprising thing is that all of this vibrance can flourish in everyday moments. An elder placing flowers at the beach at dawn, a teenager strumming samba chords on a balcony, a teacher drawing forest maps on chalk, neighbours hugging at a market. In these seemingly small actions, Brazil offers a collective lesson. That transformation is not necessarily delivered by grand gestures. It comes through the accumulation of many tiny ones. It arrives in the way we greet each other, respect our trees, honour our ancestors, speak truth in public spaces, share our secrets in song. As the sun finally sets and a hush falls over the land, Brazil exhales into starlight, each star a dream, each village a covenant. The nocturnal call of a whippoorwill or the distant roar of a river turning in its bed becomes a lullaby. It's not a lullaby of forgetting, but a lullaby of weaving. So tonight, as you drift off, carry this memory. Brazil doesn't ask you to understand it in a single breath. It invites you to return, to taste again, to listen again, to open your heart again. Like a samba rhythm, it repeats. And each repetition is an opportunity to add your own twist. And so, as we gently close this long and winding journey through Brazil, we return to where we began, with a soft breath, a curious heart, and perhaps a little more wonder than before. From rainforests that pulse with life, to city streets that shimmer with stories. From ancient traditions whispered beneath starlit skies, to new dreams rising like sunbeams over distant hills. Brazil has shared itself with us. Not all at once, but in layers, like a lullaby that deepens the longer you listen. We've wandered far, together, through feasts and forests, festivals and footpaths, faith and football. We've met a land that laughs with its whole body, sings with its history, and dances even in the face of difficulty. And if any part of this vast, colourful country stirred something inside you, an image, a scent, a question, a smile, then perhaps, in some small way, Brazil will now live a little inside you too. So before your eyes grow too heavy, let me ask again, where in the world are you listening from? What time is it there, right now? Midnight? Early morning? Somewhere in between? Share it in the comments if you'd like. I'd love to know where our paths have crossed tonight. And if this journey helped you unwind, helped you dream a little bigger, or sleep a little deeper, consider leaving a like or subscribing to the Sleepy Explorer. Every bit of support helps these stories continue, drifting softly from one corner of the world to another. Thank you truly for joining me tonight. Wherever you are, whatever your sky looks like right now, may it be peaceful. May your sleep be deep. And may your dreams carry you somewhere just as magical. Boa noite, and until next time.